Cool. So we'd like to welcome Kelly Ryan, who has got a very spotted past. I don't know why anyone ever hired him, but he's come along to tell us where he came from, what it's all about, and where he's up to. So welcome, Kelly.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thanks for having me, everyone. And I hope I don't bore you too much in the next wee while talking beer and fermentation and everything in between. But it's been 20 years this year since I started in the brewing industry. So I guess that with these grey hairs, I guess that kind of makes me one of the sort of elder statespeople of the brewing scene in this day and age. But yeah, started off, did my schooling and grew up in Taranaki down the coast from Plymouth, and went to the same school as Steve, to Francis Douglas Memorial College. Great college, go to college. And did my schooling there, studied at Otago University and mucked around my first couple of years and didn't quite get into medicine, but I did medical laboratory science for a couple of years, and then kind of made the call that I really want to play with people's blood and urine and fecal samples all day, every day, and decided that wasn't the case. So ended up doing a microbiology degree and also a food science degree, because I'd always sort of had another thought of doing food technology, either at Massey or where I was down in Otago. And ended up with a really cool lecturer. I finished my micro degree and was partway through my food science degree. And the head of the food science department was a gentleman from Belgium. His name was Jean-Pierre Dufour, JP, as everyone affectionately knew him. And so as the head of the department, it just so happened all the way through the sort of the levels in the degree, the second, third, and fourth sort of year levels, most of his papers would end up somehow discussing beer or yeast. So he was pretty much an internationally renowned scientist in terms of yeast, using a system called gas chromatography and an olfactometer to pretty much run different samples, beer samples, fermentation samples through a system and look at the compounds that things like the different yeast strains were making and producing, and then having this crazy system where it actually would puff out the certain smells that you would sit there with this crazy little sort of sniffing port, and you'd be able to make an association between the smell and what the actual compound was in terms of its molecular weight and everything in between. So it meant that when we did sort of any papers with him, it would always somehow end up talking about brewing or his absolute passion of yeast, being a Belgian in particular. And I remember my last year at university, I did postgrad and doing flavor chemistry and fermentation science papers with him. And one of my favorite ever classes was sitting down with him. There's, I think, about 7 or 8 students in postgrad. And we sat down with the 3 Chimay, the white, red, and blue, and Duvel as well. And that was our class, was sitting down and tasting these really cool Belgian beers. This was in the late 90s, late 90s, year 2000, somewhere around there. And it wasn't very common for a student, a Taranaki student that had grown up on Tui and Export Gold and DB Draft, had been thrown into Spates country and getting to try these really fascinating beers. So I kind of really, it sort of piqued my interest. I remember sometime around then going to Inch Bar and having probably my first ever, apart from good old Mike's mild ales and that sort of thing in Taranaki, but my first probably non-Taranaki craft beer, which was in Emerson's bookbinder at Inch Bar. So kind of, that was in late 90s, early 2000s, and then straight out of university, I got accepted into a trainee brewer program with DB Breweries. There were 4 of us that got selected, and I think 2 of the 4 are still working for DB. Natasha O'Brien's the head brewer, head honcho at Waitemata up in Auckland, and ended up in Mangatanoka at Tui Brewery. So I did a couple of years there as a trainee brewer, and I guess learned the ropes, learned how to make great continuous fermentation beer, and even the odd batch brew of quite a few Monteith's beers that we used to pump out of Tui as well. So acted as the microbiologist there for a while as well, because we had a couple of microbiologists leave, so I sort of jumped in and kind of learned that job pretty well and really enjoyed that side of it. But unfortunately, these were the times when our student loans was interest accrued daily, but it's something like 7%. And with the huge wage that comes with the brewing job, particularly as a trainee brewer, it kind of meant that my student loan kept going up, even though I was getting paid and only had a $99 a week rent with a little brewery house right on the corner of State Highway 2, which apparently a number of cars and motorbikes and all sorts have gone through the front door, but that didn't happen when I was there, which is pretty cool. So did a couple of years and had an absolute blast there, and a super great team. I still keep in touch with a few of them, and that sort of really started to cement my love and passion for brewing as a profession and as a job. But saying that, I needed to pay off this huge student loan. I thought that was something I needed to do to get ahead. I wish I'd actually just saved the money and bought a house back then, but who was I? I mean, what was I to know? But the ended up actually traveling to South Korea. I had a friend that was teaching English and playing rugby over there, and I'd loved my rugby all through school and university and stuff. So ended up over in Seoul in South Korea for 3 years, teaching English, paying off student loans, and playing rugby and seeing a lot of Asia and playing a lot of rugby 10s so I had a great time. But the this sort of a crazy liquid sort of beckoned, and I really wanted to get back into it. So me and my then partner, who's the mother, I've got two young boys, we traveled from South Korea to the United Kingdom, and I started brewing up in Scotland, and sort of in the close to the west coast in the Highlands, or in the lower part of the Highlands, a place called Loch Fyne, and it's called Fyne Ales with an FYNE. It was quite a small brewery, about 1,600 litre brew kit, but it was my very, very first sort of go at brewing, not by computer or by machine or just pushing buttons. So yeah, got thrown into the deep end. This came on as an assistant brewer there, and had a couple of months there because the brewer, they'd actually hired a brewer just before I'd arrived. He fell off his motorcycle and broke his hand, so I sort of stood in for him while he recovered. And then from there went to this was back in 2006, so I'd had 2003 to 2006 in the UK, in South Korea. And it was right in the time where there was this massive sort of, I mean, there'd always been like a lot of cool stuff going on there in the British brewing industry, but kind of from that 2000 to sort of 2005, 2006, there was a sort of proliferation of newer, younger brewers that were coming through, and I guess not challenging the traditional cask ale system, but looking at it with sort of fresh eyes. And so I joined this little brewery in Derbyshire called Thornbridge, which is a tiny little brewery. We're brewing about 3,000 litres a week. So roughly what I would have been brewing at Fork and Brewer by myself. But there were two of them there, two guys that I was coming in to take over. If one of the guys was going to leave, he wanted to start his own brewery. That's a guy called Martin Dickey, and he went on to start a tiny little brewery called Brewdog. So I sort of came in as his replacement. And he sort of showed me the ropes. He's a young lad. He'd done his brewing degree at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. It was his first brewing job. He actually wanted to be a distiller, and ended up on the brew kit. Real young, really enthusiastic, but he didn't really get on that well with the other brewer, who was also a young first job out of university sort of guy, a guy called Stefano Cossi, and he's an Italian food scientist that had come in and moved to sort of Yorkshire and Derbyshire and got stuck into the brewing scene. So I came in 2006 and started and really sort of learnt really quickly to brew great cask ale. So my partner then, Catherine, we couldn't really afford to live off the salary that they were paying us. I think it was £16,000 a year in mid 2000s. But they said, do you want to live above a pub and run a pub as well? And Catherine was my partner. She'd done a little bit of hospitality work through uni and stuff, and went, yeah, we'll give it a go. So she took over running the pub. It's about 20 odd miles from the brewery, just at the top of Derbyshire, right on the border, really close to Sheffield, up in Yorkshire, if anyone is familiar with the area between Sheffield and Chesterfield, a little town called Dronfield. So we ended up living in this newly kind of renovated, an old pub, 1798 it was built, an old coach house. And it was on the grounds of the world's oldest football club, which is called Sheffield FC, which had been founded in 1857. So we were there sort of for the 150-year anniversary, and which is pretty cool. But I'm a rugby boy, so all the locals that would come and watch the football would refer to me as the egg chaser. And I played for the local rugby team, but it was it was good. So we did that, and it was all car scale. We had keg beer as well, but effectively all the car scale that we had, we were the very first Thornbridge pub, was beer that I was brewing by day and coming home and by night and learning how to run a cellar and look after car scale and kind of in terms of a brewing experience, to sit there and tweak recipes by day and then go every night and try every guile that came through, every batch that came through the brewery in a pub setting with locals drinking it was absolutely phenomenal, in terms of learning on the job and having pretty much instant feedback by, proper true speaking Northerners that wouldn't ever pull the wool over your eyes, meant that I just learned so much in such a short time. It was great. So ended up being brewing manager at Thornbridge, being there for 4 years, and we built a massive big couple of £1 million brewery as, I guess, young, late 20s, early 30-year-olds pretending we knew what we were doing. They'd be, I don't know what they're doing now, probably 5-6 million litres a year. So we've took it from when I was there, what we're doing, 3,000 litres a week to probably about 30 to 40,000 litres a week. So it was in a short period of time from coming from big breweries to very small and kind of learning this whole sort of system. It was really good. It's really, really great. So
are they still doing stuff by cask now? Are they still sticking to their knitting?
Yeah, still doing cask. Yeah, so I think they might have just moved the original Hall brewery into the estate where the main brewery is for their trial stuff, because it was originally set in Thornbridge Hall itself, which is a beautiful big sort of 100-acre country estate. It was just an old stonemason's shed that they converted into a brewery that they'd originally sourced the brewery kit. I can't recall the name of the brewery, but from the Yorkshire Moors. It's quite an old, very traditional kit. We buy all our Malton from up the road from Thomas Fawcett, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours drive away, and that would come in. We get them to mill it for us. It was into a grist case above the mash tun. It was get the shovel out and off you'd go. So it was.
So you bought it pre-crushed?
Yeah, we got everything in pre-crushed because we didn't have room in the tiny. The stonemason shed wasn't tall enough to get a mill into as well. So
wow.
But it was fine.
But you got the turnover at that.
Yeah, it was fine. We won. I think the 4 years that I was at Thornbridge, all with pre-milled malt, except for the last year. I think we won 100 British industry and global medals. Mostly with pre-milled malt. So there you go. So you don't need to mill it fresh. But we were lucky as well. We were getting it literally from, the truck would come down and be there from. It would be milled and come in, but we'd get a month's supply at a time and store it in a container. Not a chill container or anything like that. Had a couple of tarpaulins over it actually to try and reduce the heat. And that, it was pretty rough as guts really, but we made good beer, all open fermentations, using an older yeast originally from Sunderland, from the Vaux brewery. And we just played around. We eventually went to Robinson's brewery in Stockport, just out of Manchester, and got their yeast strain, and I think that was the strain that was going when I left. I don't know if they're still using it. I do know some of that.
Were you propagating that then, or you had some stores?
We were eventually. Yeah, eventually we did all our own propagation. So I designed all the lab and stuff in the brewery, and we got that going and did all our own microbiology. We were doing our micros even as a small 10 barrel, a small 1,600 litre brewery. I'd say we're probably we would have been the smallest brewery in the UK doing our own microbiology work, and it was literally using a pressure cooker, a microwave, and an incubator. We splashed out on an incubator, and eventually splashed out on a microscope for cell counts, and kind of just sort of tried to do it as professionally as we could, and got really good results doing it. We did all bottle conditioned beer when we started bottling, so we really learned the ins and outs of bottle re-fermentation and how that worked, and that unto itself is such an amazing science to perfect that. But yeah, then we went to the new brewery. We invested in centrifuges and a fully automated 4-vessel brew house and a special hot backs and pretty much we're really lucky with the owner. He'd just sold a business that was doing seals and gaskets and all sorts and engineering in the middle of Sheffield, and so he sort of bankrolled it off of that. He sort of went, go the best you can in this budget. So it was a pretty unique experience to be involved in a project like that at such a young age. As a in my early 30s, 30 years old when we started doing it. So so it was cool. So yeah, did all that, and then decided to come back home and do grown-up things like have kids and all of that sort of stuff, and moved back to Auckland. I met Luke Nicholas from Epic when I was doing World Beer Cup judging in Chicago in 2010, and I'd previously done an international collaboration with him. He'd come over for doing the Weatherspoons Real Ale Festival. And
Ian Ramsey was involved with it.
Yeah, I saw him. Yeah, Ian. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So it was awesome. I was lucky to get over there 3 times. And they fly you over, they put you in accommodation, they look after you. I got to brew at Shepherd Neame and Faversham in Kent, so the UK's oldest brewery, and these beautiful old wooden mash tuns. One of the brewers reckoned they were Russian teak, the other reckoned they were oak. So maybe, I don't know, it was one of the two, but it was pretty unique, 100-plus-year-old wooden mash vessel. Got to brew in Everard's in Leicestershire, which is amazing as well. Their yeast is still one of the finest yeasts I think I've been lucky enough to get to make beer with. And then also got to do Bateman's in Waynefleet upon Swain in Lincolnshire. So 3 pretty big family breweries. That whole Weatherspoons connection got me to sort of got me over to brew beer in them, which is phenomenal. So Luke had come over. He brewed Epic Pale Ale for cask, and we decided to do a version of our Imperial IPA, which we called Halcyon. So we did sort of an epic version of that with New Zealand hops and put that into bottle, and it was really good. It was really delicious. And then he said, yeah, if you want a job, come and you head back to New Zealand, hit me up, because at that time Luke was just pretty much a one-man band. He was doing everything, with all the recipe development and work at Steam, which he used to be general manager of, right through to jumping in his trusty Toyota Corolla and seeing how many kegs we used to be able to get in. I think we could get about 8 50-litre kegs into his little Toyota Corolla hatchback, and off we'd go around Wellington when it was delivery day. And so I moved to Auckland. We had a little apartment duo. I lived the top floor. The Epic office was the middle, and we had a big garage where Luke put a big table, and probably the bones of the Epic tap room really started there. We put a couple of double doored fridges in, and had an amazing selection of beers all the time. And he pulled out his old brew kit. I think it was his father-in-law's that he kind of had done a lot of brewing on with his father-in-law, Tony, and said, well, we better start doing some recipe development. So that was really, I guess, my first foray into home brewing size brewing. It was always slightly larger than that.
Be somewhat of a back step then.
Yeah, I went from the biggest to the smallest. Yeah,
biggest to the smallest.
Yeah, I think we do about 120,000 litres a day equivalent at Tui, down to doing I think I do like 50-litre batches at the Epic HQ. So, but it was good, did lots of recipe development, did coffee and figs, and we ended up doing hop zombies and all sorts of cool stuff when I was there. And it was good. We did we tried to get enough funding to do this sort of like web-based series called New Zealand Craft Beer TV, just to try and sort of showcase what was happening in the New Zealand brewing scene back then in 2011. And I think we managed to get all the South Island episodes sorted, but ran out of funding to do all the editing and stuff for the North Island. So hopefully that footage is still around somewhere to come out on a rainy day. But
it's probably a wee bit ahead of its time, I guess. I mean, now that stuff would be lapped up,
Yeah, it was it was good. It was sort of it was pretty impromptu, and it was definitely a thrown in the deep end sort of thing. I was used to managing a brewery, not trying to write scripts for webisodes and interviewing brewers. But no, it was so cool, and such a good way to sort of, I guess, reintroduce myself into the New Zealand brewing scene and find out what was happening and taste all these fantastic beers up and down the country. So I did that, and then I kind of had itchy feet. We were brewing the beer out of Steam Brewing Company in Otahuhu, and I mean going to the brewery every day, but it wasn't really as much on the tools. It was more just doing sensory and recipe development. all the logistics and getting labels and bottles and boxes and cases and everything in between, which was cool. It's pretty much my job now. But Brian Watson, who is another kind of old school DB brewer. He was a trainee in the trainee brewer scheme 10 years before I was, and he ended up based up in Auckland. I'd known him through judging and stuff, and met him a few times. And he said, "Oh, hey, I'm looking at setting up a brew pub in Hamilton. Do you want to come and help me build it and be the head brewer and get it going?" So I ended up at Good George for just under 2 years, I think it was, and did a bit of consultancy work. Got over to Canada and onto Prince Edward Island to help some breweries out there. And to Fiji, to Nandi as well, to also help out a brewery there. That's, I think, now been sold to, I think, Coca-Cola. It was called Island Brewing Company. They're called Vonu, nice lager. And so I had a couple of cool trips and really good learning experiences doing that sort of stuff. And then, we got Good George going, and the idea was for me to be the sole brewer for the first 12 months, and we hit capacity in 6 weeks. So it was a mad hustle to try and to get that sort of developed and growing, and getting new brewers and putting processes into place to make a lot of beer, and make a lot of beer for Hobbiton as well, which is probably one of our biggest customers. They're pretty thirsty, those hobbits. So they
have you been back to the, because it's just grown and grown and grown. They've sort of taken the plant next door, and there's all sorts of fermenters every place you can think they've put one. It's kind of,
it's a great use of space, really. I guess for an area of Hamilton that's quite industrial and had a lot of buildings, they've gone under the roads with pipes and all sorts, and obviously got distilleries over the road and a fantastic lab, a lot better than the basic one that I had when I was there. Incredible. They'd be doing probably 10 times the volume of what I was doing when I was there, and it's and on quite a small brew kit as well. So it's pretty impressive. They did pretty well on the latest brewing awards. I see they've got quite a few medals, so they're obviously making some good beer as well. And
I think it's the same mash tun.
What's that?
It is the same mash tun.
I think it might have got stretched. They were going to stretch it, and I think they extended the kettle as well so you could boil a bit more. But yeah, amazing. We always set it up to hopefully be able to do sort of at least 3 brews a day, when we sort of figured out the processes and sort of designed the brewery. So pretty sure they'll be doing that, and probably then some. So yes, I did that. Then sadly my father got crook with cancer, so he passed away. We know I better move back to Taranaki, be a bit closer to mum for a bit of moral support. So me and my then partner Catherine and my young son Patrick, we moved back to New Plymouth, actually. So got to live in New Plymouth for the first time in my life, even though I'd done my schooling there, and did up a house, and ended up doing a little bit of home brewing. And my brother was a keen home brewer, and he said, "Oh, can you set us up a brewery while you're home?" So set him up a little brewery, which is sort of a bit almost retired now, but it might come back from the dead. I called Brew Mountain. It was actually Joe from Liberty's old mash tun and kettle. He'd just finished in Taranaki, New Plymouth, and decided to move back up north to obviously Helensville area, and they did the bear fountain, wasn't it? Hallertau and Liberty joined forces on Hallertau's site there, and before obviously Joe went up by himself. So it was pretty serendipitous. He was like, "Yeah, have this, see what you can do with it." So we plumbed that into my mate Liam. There were three of us kind of got it going. Liam, he was a local GP, and put it into his garage and got it all set up, and we're brewing. He got a couple of chillers into his garage, and temperature controlled chillers for fermentation.
So
and
what size, what meterage was that kit then?
Oh, sorry, you just broke up there. Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, what size was the mash tun and kettles and that sort of thing for that?
Oh, sorry, yeah. It was we were brewing about 300, or we could get about 380 liters, I think, brewing in terms of into the kettle. So we'd end up usually with about 6 kegs a batch, so it wasn't much. But we got Hallertau actually to do some bottles for us. So Brew Mountain did the first beer was named after my dad. My dad was quite a good boxer. He went to the Olympic Games in '72, and he's a little featherweight and one of the boxing writers here in New Zealand. I think a guy called Brian O'Brien in the Ring magazine referred to him as Pale Pat Supreme with the choir boy looks. So we thought, oh, we're cool. We'll honour Dad with this beer and call it Pale Pat Supreme. So nice easy drinking, I think it was 4.6 or 4.8% pale ale, Leewalkers and Amarillos and Citras and all the good stuff. So yes, that was fun. And then, but I got a call actually from a guy called Colin Mellon. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Colin from his time at the Malt House here in Wellington, and he's also one of the founders of Falk and Brewer. And he said, "Oh, look, we need a brewer, our brewer Lester at Falk and Brewer. They've been going for a couple of years, maybe brewing for about 2 years." He said, Lester wants to make a move. Do you want to come and be our brewer? And I was doing up a house actually at the back of Francis Douglas where I'd gone to school, and on Tukapa Street, and went, as I was hanging off a roof with probably not quite OSHA approved scaffolding. In fact, I remember having to go bare feet because I got hook my toes around the guttering to stay on the roof properly when I was painting it. So it was to go from that to the safe place, the safe brewery zone was quite a good idea. So
a place with scalding water and
high pressure,
caustic
moving parts to it actually was safer. So I ended up Falk and Brewer. So I was there for 6.5 years. Did my time there and smashed out a few beers all on my lonesome. So, but got it was great. I loved my time there, but I got a bit lonely. I kind of missed the challenges, I guess, of managing a team again, and actually being able to talk to someone else apart from the yeast, which I'd probably start doing a bit too much of it. Falk and Brewer by myself early in the morning.
Is that the secret to your results? You actually talk to your yeast, so that's what.
In Korean, just to really confuse everyone. Did 200 and I don't even know, something like 260 or 270 different beers in my time there. Lots of small batches and a core range of 30 beers, which is we had 40 or 42 taps. 41 of them was our beer. So it was a great, again, really cool learning experience as well.
You say small batches, so you put it in perspective for us home brewing guys.
So a small batch. I've got a pilot kit which does it's a 65 litre brew length. So I usually get about 60 litres into FV and end up with about a keg, usually 50 litres, give or take, depending on.
Oh, so they really were just a single serve,
keg.
essentially.
Yeah. So I do those, and then I also had a couple of sort of one American barrel, so kind of 1.2 hectolitre-ish fermenters that I plumbed into the glycol system at the brewery. So it meant that I could, if I was doing a brew, I'd just slightly high gravity brew it and then get another hectolitre, another 100 litres out, and do trials with different yeasts, different additions of maybe adjuncts or sugars or date syrups or whatever it would be, different yeast strains. Had a couple of small barrels as well as a couple of larger barrels, and start playing around with wild yeasts and getting local fruit from here in Karori. My next door neighbour has a whole lot of dams and plums, and playing around doing kind of some dams and wild ales, and working with Bretts and lactic acid bacteria and PDOs and just sort of having a bit of a play on the side, really, all as a small batch releases.
So how much grain could you get in that mash tun then?
The mash, I can max it out at about sort of, I think, depending on the liquor to grist ratio, about 19 kilos, I think was the most I could get in. I might have been able to fit about 20 if I'd really kind of pumped it up into the low liquor to grist ratio. But it's good. It was a company that's gone defunct now, but it was called Brewtech, but not like the SS Brewtech. It was BREWTEK. It was a really nice little system. I think Otago Brew School bought some, but they worried that they were too unstable because they're quite a tall gravity fed system, but they're all good. I've done many, I don't know how many, I think I did the maths. I think I did the equivalent to generate for the pub about $70,000 of sales out of that little pilot brewery. So it was really good. And in fact, I'm breaking it up for the first time because it's my own one tomorrow with the team at Boneface. A couple of the staff have never really gone through the process of completely brewing a beer before because they're on a packaging line or doing the cellars or whatever. Or one of the lads is just starting to learn on the brew kit as a second sort of brewer. We're doing their first brew. So I've got them. They're all fans of dark lagers. So we're going to do a nice sort of dark lager, and hopefully tonight they're sitting at home in front of their computer doing lots of research.
So will it be a Swartz beer or?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm going to see what they come back with tomorrow, but we'll do it with I've got a fresh culture of it's actually a California lager, so the Anchor yeast. So we'll do it at a slightly elevated temperature, maybe about 16 degrees. And And yeah,
a dark Californian common then.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, there's lots of either Sarts or Hull Melon, I think will be the hop. Little bit of maybe cinema or something like that for color, as well as a little bit of roast. But I've given them a list of grains to look at, and yeah, I'm quite excited to see what happens at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning when they come in.
So why would you add colorant rather than using actual grain then?
Well, the crew in particular are more of a fan of Japanese dark lagers, that sort of style. So Asahi blacks and Sapporo blacks and that sort of thing. So in terms of the drinking them next to a Schwarzbier or like a Czech dark lager or something like that, they're a lot less roasty. So that's something that they have sort of said to me, we don't want something that's too full on and too, I guess, stout-like. We want something that tastes, we want to try to make something that tastes like this. So I've used cinema or roasted malt extract. There's a few different ones on the market for a long time, usually just for color, tweaking color, but also for black IPAs. Of the black IPA that I used to brew at Fork and Brewer was done. Originally, it was done with Carafa Special 2 or Carafa Special 3, but I just started utilizing cinema, and you get a real just clean sort of maltiness. You don't get a hardcore lot of roast with that. So it's it works well, and it's good to adjust it to color and not get too much flavor as well. So that's what they want, and then we'll look at that as a base recipe, and if it's good, we'll have another go. And who knows? I'd like to say we'd have a Boneface dark lager in a can one day, but I don't think the market's quite ready for that yet.
I just got a quick question for you. How's
things? Yeah.
Hey, high grav. That's not something you sort of see homebrewers probably do as much as they could do, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But something that especially if you want to split off batches for fermentation and things like that, it's a pretty cool thing to do. You got any tips on brewing high gravity?
Yeah, it's not, I've always sort of done, I guess even from when I started as a brewer, we were brewing very high gravity and we're fermenting very high gravity, and then liquoring back by about 30 to 35% post filter with water. So that was the kind of the big brewery way. So a slightly different approach, obviously, for smaller breweries. Same principles in a way, but just doing dilution hot side in the kettle. One thing I've found is a lot of literature will say you don't really want to go over about 15%, maybe maximum 20% in terms of liquoring back. But I don't know, I've found that you can go as high as 25% and still have a pretty great beer. It's so I might really try and max everything out. The key for particularly a small brew pub is that if I can get 2 kegs more out of a batch just by being a bit, as clever as I can in the process, that's a lot of profit for the not so much for the brewery, but for the bar, and it means that by doing that, then I can get to have more fun by asking the owners for more equipment or more expensive ingredients or something like that. So I guess it's sort of that necessity, comes about from you've got to be smart and max out efficiency and make the business profitable in a way, so then you can use those profits to have more fun.
So what sort of gravity are you starting at, and then what are you cutting it back to?
Take, say, for example, today, a brew we did today, it was a contract brew, but that for a client, and that would have been, we had a gravity of 1050, 1050.5 that we were aiming for, and post boil, the gravity was actually 2 points higher than we were expecting. It was we were using different malt. It was 1069.9. So if you do the 51 divided by 5/7, so it's actually it's sort of a 20+%, isn't it? Kind of give or take liquor back. So you can do it. There's when I was at one of the world, I have been lucky enough to judge in a few of the World Beer Cup competitions over in the US, which is kind of like the big, the Olympics of beer that they run every 2 years, and they have this incredible symposium, this big craft brewers conference with speakers from all around the globe. And I recall there's one brewery based, I can't recall exactly where in the East Coast it is, but it's called Iron Hill, and they have done a lot of work on particularly their lautering or lautering efficiencies, but really looking at things like final runnings gravities. So really monitoring exactly what your last runnings are that you're pumping into the kettle. They were looking at that heavily, and they found that they won heaps and heaps of great American Beer Festival medals, this brewery, particularly for lager styles. And they found that when they cut their last runnings off at 10, 20 or higher, they were actually, and then instead of you just running your last runnings through and potentially having high pH last runnings and any astringency and any of that sort of stuff coming from the husks and the grist, they found that at that point, at that magic number, when they look back on all their medals and their higher medals and look at the brew sheets, they were actually cutting the runnings off 10, 20 or above. And from there, they went, hey, let's just add an extra bag or an extra kilo or whatever of grain into our mash, into our grist, and cut it off higher all of the time, and then just liquor back with water in the kettle, either pre-boil or post-boil. And they just got consistently good results. And it kind of scientifically makes sense as well. So I guess it kind of comes a little bit, obviously, from being able to get more beer into a fermenter, and then more beer out, and hopefully then selfishly give yourself, as a brewer, more sort of future fun to be had in terms of a brew being able to afford you to do that. The other thing is that it actually produces a high quality beer. So that's, I guess it was those two things really coming together. That and then obviously different breweries, how they're set up as well. I mean, you've just got to completely manipulate the way you do things from brewery to brewery and find the best practice that you can.
So what's the water treatment on the cutting back water?
The water treatment cutting back is nothing. I used to do a minor acidification depending on what base malt I was using when I was at Fork. But for us at Boneface, we're actually playing around a lot at the moment with liquoring back post or pre-whirlpool and post boil, and looking at trying to depending on what our liquor back volume is, which is usually around 20-ish%, give or take. We just playing around with the temperature of that going in to try and hit a really good temperature around. We're sort of generally hitting around 82 to 85 degrees Celsius for putting our hops into whirlpool. And
it's been filtered. But
the water just now it's usually just cold liquor. So cold liquor going into 100-degree work, and that's sitting at probably about 12 degrees Celsius, something like that.
And no other water adjustments or anything.
The only time we're really doing water adjustments is mash salt additions. We might even now and then do a kettle salt addition, depending on what sort of mineral profile.
But
the actual water itself.
You're back liquoring into whirlpool. You're saying it's not even filtered, so you're not even running it through a carbon filter.
Oh, excuse me. All of our apologies. All of our.
Otherwise you'd be getting a bit chlorophenol issues, wouldn't you? Pops and stuff.
Oh, you probably wouldn't at that temperature. I mean, you're
rough enough.
Yeah, it's hot enough, and but yeah, now every single bit of water in the brew we run through a big carbon filter. So apologies. Yeah, so everything we use is carbon filtered, from the water we drink out of the tap in the morning to see what it's tasting like, right through to rinsing the suds off cans and bottles. It's all carbon filtered. So it's just carbon filtered, but I mean, in theory, it could have bugs or anything in it. But obviously that 80-ish degrees temperature during whirlpool and during cooling, it's sitting there for 30 plus minutes, with 15-minute whirlpool. And we don't have any issues with microbial stability or anything like that. It's good. We're getting really good, a lot better, a lot more subtle bitterness from our whirlpool additions, which means we can really play a bit more with the amount of hops that we're loading into it. And getting some great hop character as well. Yeah, so it's all every day's I say this to the crew, and every day's a school day, and we're still learning. And every day I'll read a new sort of research paper that some clever sort of brewers and brewing scientists around the globe are looking at all sorts of stuff, particularly around hops. And it's an exciting sort of world we live in. It's a good time to be a brewer, particularly with all of the developments with yeast and biotransformation, and looking at different enzymes and how they're working in terms of transforming hop characters that we're getting from both hot and cold side and everything in between. I know I'm sure a lot of you have read him, but it's a great sort of brewer and blogger called Scott Janish, and he's doing some phenomenal stuff. If you ever look up his name, which is Scott, and then it's Janish, Janish. Sorry. Really, really interesting research, and we're trying to kind of make that work in our beer, and doing okay. It's sort of, we're noticing an improvement in a lot of our beers just by adopting a few new processes and getting some science into us. So it's good.
So you want to tell us a wee bit about the people probably finished it, but the big unit at first beer, because we're probably going to get on to cracking the next one if people haven't started already. But if you tell us a wee bit about that beer.
Yeah, so big unit. So this is obviously Boneface was started and founded by Matt Dainty, who's our owner, and he's got a pretty good pedigree. He was head brewer at Renaissance for a few years, and they won all sorts of medals and I think Guild Awards and Australian Brewing Awards and everything under him as head brewer. So he set up Boneface about 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago now. And one of his first beers, the unit, was his baby, and probably one of the, not the earlier ones, but one of the few it was just called a New Zealand IPA, but it didn't mention the fact that it wasn't filtered. It was a hazy without being called a hazy, and that's something that Matt's sort of done a lot of, but I finally managed to convince him, even though I'm historically not a massive fan of hazy beers, but we managed to get him to put that word finally on the can. So we'll see if it doubles sales, because that's the world we live in a way. If it says hazy, you'll sell lots of it. But so Unit was a beer based on Motueka and Nelson Sauvin in particular. A big dry hop, not massive, like the normal Unit's 6%, and we're probably looking at about 7.5 grams per litre dry hop, and about, in the Whirlpool, we're only looking at about sort of a 5 gram per litre addition of Mott and Nelson Sauvin, and pretty simple grist with Pilsner malt and Carapils, and actually Caragold, Warminster Caragold goes into it. In the past, we used Vienna and Munich, but we've just been tweaking it a bit and started just using Munich. And then it's
Caragold, did you say?
Yeah, you're from Warminster Mouldings in the UK, and there's not really much like it from Gladfield. It's kind of a Carapils cross with a toffee malt, I guess, in a way. I mean, in terms of the flavour it gives, and just gives a nice little bit of maltiness to the beer without being kind of overbearing or too caramelly or anything like that, which is pretty cool. But we're only using a very small amount, only a bag, and it's probably, what's the grist, sort of 725, 750, I think it is, kilos. So it's only one bag going in, but it's part of the recipe that Matt's always used, and it works well. So we use 008 from White Labs as our house strain for our hazy beers or unfilters, which is your 008 East Coast Ale, I think it's called. We'll run that up to about sort of 12 or 13 generations. We've done either propagations in-house. We've got a 1 barrel, and I've just got a big 5 litre flask with a stir plate, and we've also bought it in pitchable amounts. And it's a great yeast. It's got really good sort of colloidal stability, so it doesn't drop out of suspension that well. It's probably out of style if we're talking BJCP NEPAs, because you should be able to see through it, but we find that it doesn't really hold a heap of the bittering compounds that some of these yeasts can hold when they don't flocculate that readily. So it's still quite a smooth beer. And this is lots of Sauvin and lots of Motueka. I think it's about 12 grams per litre dry hop. So we do a process called hop burping. So twice a day, we'll bring once the fermentation's getting near the end and we've taken yeast off, then we dry hop it. We'll let the pressure build up ambient for when we're doing a diacetyl rest, a VDK rest. Not that you really need to so much with this yeast again, because it's so flocculent. But we'll usually drop it down to about 2/3 of a bar, 10 psi, and then just bubble it through for a minute or two up to a bar again, and then we'll drop it back again in the afternoon and do the same, just to really get those hops into suspension. Probably more important for lower ABV beers, because just, I guess, the solubility of the hop compounds that we're trying to get, particularly those aroma compounds, into the liquid. Most of them aren't really that sort of water soluble. Some of the compounds are, but a lot of it's ethanol, alcohol soluble as well.
So the agitation's what's actually doing the stripping, is it?
Yeah, it's just giving more chance for there to be that sort of liquid surface area interaction with the sort of hop particulates. If they all, particularly with Slinger conical vessels, everything sinks to the bottom, in theory, your only surface area is the top of that cone. So by really just blowing that up every time and letting it drop down again, releasing the pressure, which then creates sort of all those wonderful yeast nucleation points to release carbon dioxide, and it sort of self-rouses and then bubbling through again. We're just getting good mixing. We're still getting good flocculation.
So
and it's just something.
what sort of day of the ferment are you doing that then?
Depends on the on how strong the beer is and at what stage, but we might try and take yeast off about 3 or 4 gravity points prior to the end of fermentation to final gravity, final attenuation.
Right.
So we'll take yeast off because generally a lot of we'll try and take it mid-cone. And then we'll, after that, we'll dry hop over either 1 or 2 days, depending on the hop loading as well. And if it's quite a small hop loading, if it's maybe between 5 and maybe 8 grams per liter, we'll probably just do it all in 1 day. If it's larger than that, we might do it over 2 days just to make sure we don't get clumping and stuff on the top of the fermenter. And then depending, we might do anything up to a 72-hour VDK rest, and we'll try and do 2 hop burps a day over those 72 hours, so 6 hop burps in total. And again, it's just trial and error. We're playing around with, particularly with these sort of New Zealand hop-led beers. We've got a couple of hop suppliers, New Zealand hops and freestyle hops, and about to do a little bit of stuff with Hop Revolution as well, which is going to be cool. But with those two, we can actually really look at the batches that we're getting in and choose whether we're going to use them hot or cold side as well, and see what sort of results we get with that. That's something I did a lot of when I was at Falcon Brewer with hops, the same hop varieties coming from different farms or different areas of the farms, and looking I do a lot of hop sensory work as well for a couple of the hop sort of companies, and it's been cool to see the variations from almost from like field to field, or from a slope to a flat, and or a picking window of 2 or 3 days, the difference, and then and trying to figure out kind of where it is that we want our sort of key varieties that we're buying in, where it is that we want to pick them, and if eventually we can get to the point where we can almost say, hey, can we get these soven 2 days before they are ripe, because we're finding we like that character more than we like this character, or what have you. So the whole hop world,
on the left side of the hill.
Yeah, it's pretty much like that. We're really lucky with freestyle hops. They do drone flyovers. They're looking at soil temperatures and moisture contents. They're sort of logging as much data as they can, and then trying to associate that back with characteristics that brewers are picking up when they're doing nosings and doing their batch selection for the year and things like that. And they're very open.
Where are their growing areas then?
All in the Nelson region. Yeah, they've got a big farm there. I can't remember, it's called Sunshine Valley, I think, the area that the farm's in. But it's just really cool. It's come along. I was really lucky in the UK. We got to do batch selection every year as a small brewery, and I guess coming back to New Zealand, I made the assumption it would be the same here. This is more when it was just New Zealand hops, but New Zealand hops are like, go away, small brewers. We're used to dealing with the big guys. But it's been, I think, having a few more hop companies and cooperatives starting up in New Zealand has been a bit more competition, and it's meant they're more interested in the feedback from the brewers and brewers trying to really focus on getting the best out of their hops as well. So it's a win-win situation for brewers, for hop growers, and for drinkers as well, because it means we're trying to get the best out of these.
Well, that sounds quite progressive with those, like the drone technologies, that sort of stuff. That sounds a bit different from some of the older hop growers who wouldn't know what a drone was. So.
Yeah, no, it's moved leaps and bounds, and you got people like Dr. Ron Beatson, who's always been a hugely influential figure in the global hop industry, and just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet as well. And if you got a question, I just call Dr. Ron, and getting to work with him and pick brains like that. And sort of see his passion for what it is that he's done for 40, 50 odd years. It's great. It's, again, we're living in a pretty special time, because when I started as a brewer back then it was called the Institute of Brewing, wasn't the Institute of Brewing Distilling, the IOB. Doing those exams, we literally got given a photocopy bit of paper with a whole lot of references on them that we had to try and find in some sort of library if we could. To right now, we've got everything on the internet. What you can learn, you've got a question, you Google it, you can find literature and scientific abstracts, just like that. And it means if you've got that curiosity, you can just go hardcore and sort of satiate it, and then try and experiment in the brewery as well, and see if you can make what happens in the lab happen in the brewery as well. So it's
Just got one question for you, Kelly. With the
Yes.
selection of hops in terms of more hot or cold side, what are the kind of characteristics that determine that selection for you? What are you looking for that sort of swings the pendulum either way?
Yeah, no, good question, Dave. No, it's a kind of a hard one, because I think almost not quite every week now, but every month there's more and more research being done into all of the different compounds that are coming from hops and what's happened to them both on hot side and cold side. And I think the key thing is really just hop interactions when you're using multiple varieties and looking at stuff. I know there's a lot of stuff touted about, say, for example, Southern Cross, and using that with certain varieties, and you're actually bringing aromas that you wouldn't usually pick up if you're using them by themselves. You're bringing them above threshold. So all of a sudden, you've got two varieties that you wouldn't think would maybe produce something like a passion fruit character coming together, and boom, getting this massive passion fruit character. So hop interactions is something that I guess there's a little bit of research being done on, but you kind of just got to figure that out yourself in the brewery, doing small batches and playing around.
And less combinations, I guess, because as soon as you throw more than 3 in the mix, it's going to be wild, right?
Big time. Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is we've got to remember that the variation from batch to batch and hops around the world is actually quite large. It's when you're sitting down and we'll do 7 or 8 different lots or blocks when we're doing something like Sauvin, and you go from 1 to 7, and you'd swear they're all different hops, but they're all Nelson Sauvin. So it's obviously that's a massive part of the initial sort of process. If you've got the advantage to do hop crop selection, that's super good for us. It's so cool. But the other thing is I'm looking usually at things like total oil content, and looking at if there is any literature on the actual hop chemistry itself. And then maybe there's some literature on things like hop derived esters and all these new sort of compounds that have been coming out, all these sort of mercaptans and these 4 MHPs or MMPs and all these different ones that are really being highlighted at the moment, particularly with the role of the glucosidases, which are a group of enzymes that can give some pretty cool transformation in hops during fermentation on cold side. So we add a Lalaman compound called aromazyme to a lot of our hoppy beers, which is a beta glucosidase, and I think we find that gives some pretty good hop character.
What does that do?
So so some yeasts will inherently have the genetics to produce an enzyme called beta glucosidase, and it effectively just acts as a cleavage enzyme and changes the aromatic characteristics of some of the sort of aromaphore hop compounds. So there's work also being done. We can't get them in New Zealand because they're genetically modified organisms, but there's a company over in the US called Omega who do, I don't know if you can get some Omega yeasts here in New Zealand, I think, that do a couple of genetically engineered ones that have actually had the gene for that enzyme inserted into the DNA of the yeast, and they produce it naturally, and you're just getting crazy sort of like massive tropical flavors and stuff from beers that you wouldn't usually get a heap of using your standard variety. So
was that from the resulting glycosides that you're going to get in the finished product, or
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's just modifying. The thing with the aroma compounds cleaving. What's that? Yeah, something. Yeah, it's be apparently. Again, we'll probably never get to try it over here, which is probably a subject for another day in terms of GMOs and that world. But it's good. There's all that sort of stuff going on at the moment as well. So yeast, for me, I can tell you for sure. I think I went through about 11 or 12 different primary strains when I was at Falcon Brewer to try to find one that really worked for the brewery, and that came about actually because when I started there was a bit of a hop shortage prior to me starting, and the owners had panic bought quite a lot of hops, and I think I had something like when I arrived there in 2014, I think there was something like 400 kilograms of US Cascade that they had stored, and at that stage they were probably using about 30 kilos a year. So I had to get pretty creative with slightly older hops, and that brought me interestingly to the California Lager, the California Common yeast, and playing around with that and noticing that it was really, really kind of good at reducing any potential isovaleric acid, so that classic cheesy hop character you can get from maybe slightly aged or slightly oxidized hops. I would sadly put a little bit of Cascade into every brew just to try and get rid of it and use it up, because there's a lot of money spent the hops. And notice that this yeast it would actually kind of make the hop smell better. So it was really just trial and error, which is what you do in a brewery. It's effectively just a large working lab that you can get drunk off. It's and being able to sort of play around and figure that out meant that it's there was a lot of other cool stuff. I did a really good pale ale back in the early days called God's Own Beat, and that was done with the lager strain. It just has a lot of, I think, modern brewers here in New Zealand do pilsners with 001 or US 05 or something like that. So, but yeah, it's all, again, it's a.
So what yeast were you using for that one?
For when I was at, that was
the same one, the same hop ferment.
Yeah, so I'd play around anything from 14 degrees up to about 23 degrees, depending on the beer style that I was doing. But usually if I was doing a lager, I'd start it at 16 and just let it free rise up to about 18 and then do a de-rest at 20. And then with...
But using that California common strain though.
Yeah. And it's bottom flocking. It's good. I mean US 05s have got some lager yeast in it as well. It's not a pure strain. So it's something that, for me, whether it's top or bottom fermenting, it's more about the outcome in the end. I'd always pitch slightly higher with the California lager yeast. I probably didn't really need to, but it's just a great versatile yeast that I could do quite a plethora of different beers on. I could even get it to throw esters and make it almost a bit English-esque by cranking the primary fermentation temperature up higher to 22 to 23. But it didn't it still meant I got to play with other cool yeast. I can't remember how many different.
But that strain, with your lager styles and Pilsner styles,
yes.
Did you condition any? Were they conditioned longer than your pails, or were you still serving them at the same time?
At Boneface, we don't do it as much, but generally that's because we don't have the time to. However, I'm going to start playing around. We do a Pilsner at Boneface called Stay Clean, which is just a combination of Chex Arts and we're playing around with hop combos at the moment, but generally it's Pacifica. We've just done a little trial with Waiti as well, and the next batch I'm going to do a small trial with the new the NZH 102, which is a trial variety that we're looking to commercialise with New Zealand hops hopefully in the next year or two.
We had Ron's successor, or to-be successor, Kerry, on the other week, and he was talking about 002 and 802 and H01, and
good.
Trials are going quite well.
Yeah, and I think particularly the 102 is just going to be really good for lagers and pilsners, and quite citrus forward, which is what we want. We almost want to have an impression of it being a shandy, but it not being a shandy, I guess, in a way, is a real good quencher, and that's the holy grail. I love sort of so many different beer styles and brewing, but a good pilsner, a good lager is still just the hardest, most challenging one to perfect. And
what about Kolsch?
Well, Kolsch is tough as well. Yeah, even using those ale yeasts. Kolsch is super hard. That's so about just the most subtle of esters. Particularly with apples and pears and that sort of thing. But you can't beat a good Kolsch. A lot of people dismiss them because they taste a bit like sort of nothing, I guess, to some people. But those sort of styles, I think, minimalist styles, there's such a challenge in them. It's as a brewer, it comes down to complete finesse. Once you understand the systems, it's really just fine tuning, and that's I think the fun of it. I really enjoy that, just tweaking to try and dream of the perfect pint, if it exists. I don't even know if it does. But
hey, Kelly, question from me.
Yes.
I remember listening to a podcast a while ago, and like Californian lager, Californian yeast you've used for years, like Hyperlocal on those for all that.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Boneface are now using it. Like, is this something you've introduced there, or? And I'm also interested in, I guess, like, are things changing at Boneface since you've arrived there? Like, have you been given a free rein to go in there and change things, or are you sort of adopting or just going along with what they're doing?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, really. But yeah, we've just actually started. We did a couple of small trials with the San Fran lager. I think it's White Labs 810. It's scored in I can't even remember what it is, 2112, I think it is in Waste. And yeah, just literally just got it going recently. So we were generally running 001 from White Labs as our house strain, and even using that for some of our sort of India Power lagers and pilsers and stuff, and trying it again if we can to give it long lagering. But the goal now, again, particularly with Stay Clean, is I want to it might be hard over the summer period with tank space, but try and at least get a 4-week tank residence, just draining yeast off as it sits there, at hopefully sort of around 0-1 degrees Celsius to give it a proper lagering period. And I find it helped when I had the chance to do that with my beers at Fork with Bohemian, Hipster and Golden Mile. I'd try if I can to do 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it wasn't possible.
Can you talk on it off dumping it off? Is it
you can do, yeah, and you get
it
colloid. It's just, effectively based on how high your fermenter is and what temperature is. You'll get colloidal, colloidal particles and haze forming particles slowly dropping out as well. So if it's always a compromise between how much beer you want to lose and how good you want your beer to taste and look, I guess, So you've always sort of do a bit of a find that sort of common ground. But the cool thing is it takes quite a while for autolytic characters to present from yeast, generally up to about 2 months. So if you're doing a 1 month process at a cold temperature, even on a bit of yeast, it'll be pretty fine. But for me, it's more with a cone, if you can drain some out from the base and hopefully remove some of that kind of almost milky colloidal suspension, polyphenols and stuff out over time, just as gravity works. If you can get rid of them, then you'll hopefully get something that's got a bit more sort of longevity in package and will present better for a longer time and hopefully just taste nice and smooth and clean and delicious. So, but it's but yeah, so you're playing with that. We're about to start a barrel aging program at Boneface, so that's something that I've been allowed to get my sort of teeth stuck into. But you're just managing the crew.
You haven't got the room there. Where are you going to put that? There's no bloody room there.
Yeah, we got sort of about 30 or so barrels at the moment. There's a next door shed as well, which is the same actual length of Boneface, just a bit narrower, probably.
And
about half
what will the temperature gradients?
Which is pretty much yeah. That's my only concern. It's quite hot in summertime, so it's probably going to get up to probably about sort of 24, 25 degrees in the midday sun. As long as it doesn't, things like Pediococcus will start to really get unhappy, 32 to 35. 35 degrees. Just monitor the temperatures regularly. There's not a lot we can do apart from probably put wet towels in the barrels.
You say unhappy though.
Cool.
Stop working or pump out
compounds? The pedio, we want that to kind of stay happy. It'll only do what it's going to do anyway. But just to really give it enough food and polysaccharides and everything for the Brett to chew up, and obviously diacetyl to reconvert. We would need the pedio to be happy to give a bit of complexity to those sorts of beers. We don't really just want lactobacillus acidity because it's more one-dimensional than what Pediococcus damnosus will give. So yeah, a lot of, again, the thing with sour beers, it's a lot of trial and error again, even more so. But I've just got a whole lot of the little Firmzillas, those 30-litre clear Firmzillas all set up. So I've got Brett Clausenii, I've got the Bruxellensis and Bruxellensis Tavrai and Lambicus. And
so these going to be just going to keep those for the seeding of your barrels.
Yeah. So I'll just keep those cold. Take half every time, reinoculate with soured low IBU work, sub 10 IBU. And then I'm just trying to infinitely keep those cultures going in the little FVs in the corner of the brewer. I've usually got a nice little fan heater running at 26 degrees, a couple of old layer boards. But
with those barrels and the different microbes you got there, are you going to basically sort of come up with a cocktail that you're going to dose most barrels? Or are you going to dose barrels differently and then blend further down the line?
I'm going to actually do both. Yes, I want to do on 18 barrels. We'll do a Belgian pale ale. We're going to grow up some. It's the 570. We've got a good friend of ours at the brewery who's worked at Boneface for a number of years. I don't know if in the home brewing community, a few of you probably know him, Dan Philly here, Hikava.
Dan Philly,
yeah, big Dan. So
good man.
he's one of our local legends, and when he can, he's helping out with us at the brewery. So he came in. I think he got a silver medal at the Aotearoa home brewing comp a wee while ago. But his Belgian Golden Strong he brought in, and we were just like, wow, this is so good. We want to do one of these and put it into can. So based on that, we're just taking his recipe and upscaling it to do a nice sort of about 2,700 litre batch, and letting it work its magic. And then we're going to chuck it into cans and hopefully get it into cans, hopefully this side of Christmas if all goes to plan. So
you can put some in bottles. I mean, maybe that kind of thing needs to be in a bottle, doesn't it?
Yeah, we only do 330 mils, and it's always a tough decision because trying to split a beer between cans and bottles gets pretty confusing for sales and for salespeople. And it will be good in a bottle, but I don't know. It's quite a it's got a little bit of sarts in it, and it's I think a beer that will be better fresh. So we'll probably put 18-month shelf life on it. It's not low
what's
pH.
the IBU?
It'll be about sort of 25 to 30 IBU.
And ABV.
Hopefully to get it 8.5. This yeast, I don't know too much about the attenuation according to the literature is quite low, but we're using invert sugar syrup, which is what Dan used when he did his.
So you're making that on site, are you?
No, actually Chelsea in New Zealand make it. So they hydrolyze, do acid hydrolysis of glucose into sucrose into glucose and fructose. We could do it in house, but we don't really have the equipment to do that sort of volume. We've got a 100 litre brew kit on site, and we could do it probably just by adding phosphoric or tartaric acid or something. I've done that before making clear Belgian candy sugars, but it's a long, laborious process. I know doing the JP 10-year edition at Emerson, I think it took Mason, their brewer there, I think it was 8 hours to do maybe 140 litres or something. So to do
more dangerous than standing with your toes over the.
Yeah, made up on that, especially when I'm walking around the brewery naked, as I usually do. So it's could be pretty awkward. But so it's way easier and way cheaper to buy them. Yeah, I think it's something like $60 for a 26 kilo pail. So I think the labour alone of me standing there with a thermometer and a sore forearm from stirring, I'd rather just buy it. And I'll just thank Chelsea. So we're going to get that, which is going to be cool. So, but the initial brew, we're doing a Belgian pale ale or Belgian golden. Going to put a whole lot of maltodextrin in it to act as a food source for the bugs as they sort of it's quite being a low attenuating strain. It should be pretty good as well. So if I can get that beer going to barrel at around sort of 10, 20, sort of 5 Plato gravity, that should be really, really good for what we're trying to get out of it, and really for seeding the barrels as well. So then once those barrels are seeded, we'll just rinse them with hot water every time and refill them with fermented yeastish free beer and keep that program going and see how it goes. So yeah, it's going to be fun. It's a long game. So I guess that, I don't know if that means I have to stay at Boneface for a couple of years. Probably does. So, so getting to do that, just again working with the crew and putting lots of the nerdy systems that I like so much into place, and getting all sciencey and spreadsheety and just tweaking and smelling and sniffing and tasting and licking and all the other things that brewers love to do.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's good. So it's another beer to try though. Has anyone managed to get some Number of the Beast?
Yeah, I've got one here. Here's one I prepared earlier.
I'm gonna have to run and get a glass because I've been way too slow in drinking my big unit, doing bloody talking too much. It happens. Just give me 1 second to get a glass.
I'll have a pee.
I've been having a war machine in the meantime, in between. Big unit's history.
So your big unit, we picked up a silver within the Brewers Guild Awards, which is pretty cool. It seemed like it was a pretty full-on comp for judging and stuff this year. In terms of there wasn't a lot of medals. There's only gold medals, maybe 30 gold medals or something. But the Number of the Beast got nothing. But yeah, I don't quite know why that was. We'll try it anyway. we'll try it and we'll see if we can find any flaws in it, because I definitely can't. So I'm quite confused.
With the big unit, I didn't realise it was nearly 9% until I finished it.
Yeah, it's something that we've kind of I think it's a nature of this 008 yeast. I use it. We did this beer called the Passenger, which is a big sort of passion fruit, raspberry, hibiscus, imperial sour. Yeah, it's really great. It's a great, really cool, nice beer actually, and it was actually meant to be 9%, but the yeast decided to make it 10%. The 008 got it down to about 1,007 or something crazy like that in gravity, but you can't tell drinking it. And again, it's the same. You don't know it's a 10% beer. We had a couple of people at the awards sort of event that we had at Boneface last Tuesday, drinking it and then waking up with massive hangovers and also not realizing it was 10%. So rule number one, always read the ABV.
Or live dangerously.
Yeah.
So how does mega unit compare to big unit? Is that like the same
It's a
hop?
Yeah,
triple.
yeah, pretty much the triple version. Yeah, so we just go unit, big unit, mega unit. I think in the past, Matt's done little unit as well, which is the smaller version. And we're actually talking, we'd love to do like a unit 6-pack with all different kind of formats. We're sort of umming and ahhing about doing funky unit as well and doing it with maybe something interesting. So
'Cause I'm on the
pretty
mega
hazy.
unit now. It's delicious.
which one, the mega unit or?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, eh? Yeah.
Yeah.
10.5%.
Almost sort of light cheese, sort of that real, it's amazing.
No, it's cool. We're happy again. It's just good. We're again so lucky to be able to do some batch selection with the New Zealand hops that we use, and two, being able to really look in quite a detailed way at how we use those hops and where we use them. So being able to choose between New Zealand hops and freestyle hops grown varieties and using them hot or cold side is it's really cool. It's really good. So and that's
deceptively dangerous too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's I don't know. I think beers with particularly with a lot of Sauvin in them. Sort of I've been using Sauvin since 2006. Actually, Thornbridge was the first UK brewery to use Nelson Sauvin. So the first time I used it, and used this New Zealand grown variety that had been developed in the year 2000 was 5-6 years after being developed in the middle of England of all places. So it's definitely it's a cool variety, and it's got a lot of you can use it in so many different beers. A couple of years ago, I did well at the Guild Awards when I was at Fork, and the couple of gold medals I got both had actually used freestyle grown Nelson Sauvin, as had the beer that I'd done with Deep Creek that won the New Zealand IPA Challenge. It's also freestyle grown Sauvin, so you can use that. It's amazing. Again, being able to choose the best ingredients makes such a big difference in making a good beer as well.
So for those awards that if you're only making 50 to 100 litres at Fork, how do you package them for the awards?
So when I was doing the small batch stuff at Fork, obviously I do my usual 1,200 litre batches, but just be kegging them into 20 litre kegs, and they'd go. So you can do up to a 30 litre keg for the Brewers Awards. So I'd either do them either 20 litres, and I also had some little D-type 10 litre kegs as well. So I'd often send them away in 10 litre kegs, and usually do well. We got two small batch beers that we've done at Boneface. One called Enter Gingerbread Man, which is a ginger stout that have picked up a silver at the Moon Underwater Stout Challenge down south. Picked up a silver, and the Du Haas, which is a Calabeer, an Oktoberfest Calabeer that I did actually with the California lager yeast, but unfiltered. Got a silver as well. So you can still, we just, every time I'll do that, I'll just do my Boneface as 100 litre or 50 litre batches and chuck them into a couple of 20 litre kegs and put a couple on tap and then save one and decide whether we're going to chuck it into the awards or not. Try it beforehand and then cross our fingers, which is pretty much what it's about when it comes to awards.
I reckon with the haze craze, we need to see a resurgence of Calabeer.
Yeah, well, true. You'd hope it would be. Well, actually, this one just been on.
Just sneak one in there.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, this one was great. It was I actually dry hopped it, which is naughty. I did more American style mats and an American style at Oktoberfest with dry hop with Spelter Select, and so good. I really love German and English hops actually, and so it's kind of cool to be able to use those. I mean, Boneface is a pretty brutally hop focused and hop forward brewery. Matt loves hops. It's all Planet Hoptron and everything's kind of very hop focused. So it's kind of fun trying to make him be less hop focused. It's done obviously Number of the Beast was something that he developed.
It's a cracking beer, man.
Yeah, it's good, eh? It's
It's length of palate and what's going on in there. It's wicked, but it's really laid back, eh? Like
Yeah,
it's
again-
not sort of just a flavour on slot. It's everything's kind of segmented. It's
Look,
wicked.
the thing with some big stouts is they can be a bit too full on and punchy.
Yeah.
So we try and get a little bit of sort of, I guess, dryness into these beers as well to help balance them out.
Yeah,
And it just
feels
makes
wicked.
oh cheers, yeah. Now it makes the drinking experience better, you know. So you just use local coffee, some AGWB vanilla, and loads of special B, lots of special B and dark crystal, and it's actually when I saw the recipe that Matt had originally done, I think he's done 1 or 2 batches of it. Oh, it was 1 batch actually. Oh, golden syrup. There's lots of golden syrup in it as well, and treacle. But I was just like, man, it's got way too many specialty malts, and the same with Ace of Spades, which is another it's a coffee cacao stout we do. And I was like, there's no way it's going to work. And I'd never put as much specialty malts as Matt was putting into these dark beers. So that's another cool thing about working with other brewers again and at other breweries, is you'll always learn something new, and even after 2 decades of thinking I'm not.
Yeah, the coffee. This I'm curious because like the bean character in this is wicked. Like it's not that green capsicum thing, but you get a real bean character.
Yeah,
like the woodiness from the bean and everything all the way through it. It's almost like that kind of scaffold that sits under it. It's delish.
Oh, cheers! No, thanks, David. No, it's yeah, it's just clean. I mean, we don't put a lot of coffee in. We're getting about 2,800 litres into FE of this beer, and putting only 10 kilos of coffee beans in. So in terms of grams per litre, it's not a massive.
But you're basically you're putting the beans into the fermenter. You're not doing anything. It's just resting on the beans.
Yeah, just into we make big effectively cheesecloth sausages, and near the end of ferment, give them about sort of between 3 and 5 days warm side during diacetyl rest, and then at the same time we'll add our vanilla extract. We just buy the litre bottles of pure vanilla extract from AGWB. So it's pretty simple, really. It's not a complex beer.
So there's no lactose. That's a vanilla sort of.
Yeah, no lactose. We use lactose in Ace of Spades. It's a mocha milk stout, but this is lactose free. So it's solely coming from treacle and golden syrup. Any of the sort of adjunct sugars. Again, we don't want it to be too fat and full. It's again, some stouts are amazing to sip away at like that, but we're doing this in a 440 ml can, so it's probably not massively socially responsible. However,
not when it tastes this good.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Those sugars you talk about,
Ace of Spades.
they're still fermentable sugars, though, aren't they?
Oh yeah, very fermentable. Yeah, so they'll all ferment out, and that's why if we were really building up the malt base, and with maltoses and sugars that might be a little bit more complex for the yeast to utilize, we'll probably ended up with a higher final gravity. This is coming in at about just between 1013 and 1014, I think it was. So it's still, for an imperial stout, it's actually quite low. You might be getting
very low. Yeah.
And it's
Ace of Spades is good, guys, as well.
Yeah, it's a drink. Oh, yeah, sweet. Yeah, nice one.
I couldn't find the beast, so I got this.
Oh, good on you. Yeah, no, we're really stoked with that. We again picked up the silver with that at the awards, so that was it was cool. So but yeah, they're good. They're fun beers. I've brewed with coffee for way too many years, 14 years now, playing around with coffee beans and looking at where you use them in the process. I did all the coffee and fig stuff in Epic, which is really fun to do. And
coming back to that, because that's the original fig stout. With that was a reported challenge thing, wasn't it? Was it
with Victoria Wells? I think it's now like Digital Cuisine magazine or one of the she's something else. She's
doing that at
Drinks Biz. She is, yeah.
Was that done at small scale? Was that done on the smaller kit, or
originally it was? Yeah, originally.
And then scaling it up. That's where the nightmare started, right?
That was a challenge. I think one of the brewers, I won't name his name, at Steam Brewing Company ended up having to have an operation because of that beer, a hernia operation. So it was a originally it was just done for the Media Brew Challenge at Beervana in 2011, which I think we won from memory, which is cool. With Victoria Wells and I actually went to the supermarket to get dates, but the only dates I could find had some sort of weird I can't remember what the coating was, but they had some sort of added chemical to them. So it was just a small batch brewer. So I was like, bugger that, we'll do it with figs instead, because they were just natural figs. So caramelize them all up on a barbecue, and then ended up having to do that for a 5,000 odd litre batch. So it was a lot of dicing and caramelizing of figs. I think it was about 8 hours on a barbecue to do, I think, something like 40 or 60 kilos, chopping them up and batch caramelizing them in a big pot. And then we chucked those into big muslin bags on a massive big stainless steel rope, or stainless steel piece of wire, and chucked them into the kettle. And I think even I should find the link, and I'll send it to Steve, and you can share it on your page. I'm sure on YouTube there's footage of us pulling these bloody giant bags of figs out of the steaming hot kettle at Steam, and it was that's where one of the poor old brewers had a bit of a mishap. It was a challenging beer to produce, but it was really cool. We got to work quite closely with the roasters at Cafe La Fare originally, where we had got the beans from. And yeah, I've always been sort of fascinated with coffee and roast my own beans and all that sort of jazz.
Have you done anything with the cold press coffee, that way of extraction, and then adding that to beer?
I haven't personally, but I know a lot of brewers that do and have really good results with it. I've always just found by doing effectively a similar process, but using the ferment to get a bit of sort of flow through it. Something with coffee beans, you get a little bit too much astringency from them. Really, with coffee beers, about tasting every day. Excuse me, that they're on the beans, so you'll find you'll hit like a perfect point, and you've almost got to have everything ready to go to either filter or transfer off of the beans when you've got that sort of bang on coffee character without it being too astringent. And then obviously, like David was saying, that whole green pepper or capsicum is a group of compounds called bell pepper pyrazines, which produce those flavors, and they're actually quite common in some of the American grown hop varieties as well, particularly Cascade actually. So when I say Epic, I remember always tasting the Epic Pale Ale out of the FV, and we were doing our batch selection, getting the best Cascade we could, really looking for roses and lychees and Turkish delights and everything in between. And we'd often find this green pepper character. And I remember Luke doing some stuff with I think his name what was his name? Can't recall, the old head brewer at Sierra Nevada, the guy Drexler, Peter Drexler, Hans Peter. Anyway, doing some work with him, and them saying that Sierra Nevada were doing a load of research on Cascade because it was full of these bell pepper pyrazines. So we actually ended up using Cascade in the Epic Coffee and Fig Stout, almost to play on those characters that were coming from the coffee, and trying to get them to interact well with that real floral Turkish delighty, and then also sort of, I guess, green peppery character that was coming from both the hops and the beans. So I played around with all different processing of the beans. We ended up the original batch using a Sidamo, an Ethiopian grown coffee bean, and I did small batch trials and split the batches at the Epic HQ for and chose the best one, and ended up bottle conditioning some and all sorts, but looking at wet processing methods of the bean versus dry process methods. So actually going right down to how the coffee fruit itself was processed to produce the final bean, and what impact that had on the flavor as well. So we went pretty deep into it, and it was really fun. It's something we do every day with yeast and malt and hops. So it's cool as a brewer to be able to do that with all of our other ingredients as well. So it's good. Yeah.
It's funny that you probably seeded it, but I sort of get those capsicum sort of notes out of this beer now.
Yeah. It's definitely, it's the power of suggestion is wonderful, and you'll always get it. I mean, it's very seldom in a coffee beer that you won't get just the finest hint of sort of of green pepper.
Got it right on the first nose, like you get that little green bean, but it's not that vegetal kind of heavy, and then the wood, I almost get a woodiness that comes with it. That's just it's anxious, man. Yeah, no, it's getting good. And again, we try to do pretty good bitterness with this as well. It's important for, I think, a beer like this. When you're going above 8-9%, you're getting such a lot of alcohol sweetness, and the yeast is potentially, depending on the strain, producing quite a bit of glycerol, which also gives inherent sweetness. So the hardest part
for big beers is getting balance right. It's actually quite easy to make a big, strong beer, but to try and get it so it's got that, brewers make beer to drink because they like drinking. So even with the big ones, you want to be able to drink it. I mean, there are sipping beers, and we all love sitting down. We do Hand of Doom, which is a big American strong ale, which is effectively an American style barley wine. And that is a beer that I'll sit and sip, if I manage to borrow a can from work for quality control purposes, to sit down with a nice Duvel glass or a big sort of Belgian tulip and let it warm up and smell it as it warms is also a cool experience. But I'm also a glutton, so I love drinking lots of beer regardless of the ABV.
Well, you get on well with Luke.
What you finishing on this? What you finishing gravity on this?
I think from memory it was like either 1013.7 or 1013.8. So it actually dropped lower than we thought. We were hoping for 1016. So I actually had to do something to keep customs and excise happy, which I've never. First time I've done it at Boneface, and we boiled some water and carbonated it, and ran it through our dissolved oxygen meter to get it down to a sub 10 parts per billion oxygen, and then pumped that into the final beer tank and mixed it to get the ABV down, because it was sitting at about 10.6, and the maximum it can be for customs and measures and all that stuff is with 9.9 on the labels, 10.2. 4% dilution or something like that.
You didn't break out the dodgy hydrometer.
No, I didn't do that. It's just usually stick my finger and lick it. Usually does. That's actually always a fun trick. I still do to this day and have done ever since Thornbridge days. Is every time there's a work sample, you've got to taste it and then try and see if you can pick the gravity. So
that's cool.
Yeah, sometimes
it's a challenge for Club Night.
Yeah, I think anything over 1050 gets quite difficult. But under 1050, you can usually start sort of getting it about right. So. But no, these are fun beers. We've got lots of what have we got coming up? We've got we've just done a beer called with Yakima Chief Hops as a collab and Cryer Malt called Super Haze, which is using Sabro and Eldorado and 6%, and it's really good. So we've actually taken our unit base malt recipe, 008 yeast, but instead of Motueka and Nelson Sauvin, using Sabro and Eldorado, and it's phenomenal. It's the most crazily juice flavored. It's almost like juice with a shot of Malibu in it, with that Sabro coconutty sort of character.
What's your view on Neo-Mexicanus hops? Oh, sorry.
What was that? Sorry?
What's your view on those Neo-Mexicanus hops? I mean,
they have
quite
a place.
polarizing.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a massive fan of Sriracha, which is hugely polarizing. I think in New Zealand, Rako would be the kind of the polarizer of our New Zealand hops. I think it's great. I think particularly in dark beers, but if you can utilize something like Sabro with quite a fruit forward hop, Eldorado for me is quite pineapple-y. So you're almost getting that kind of pineapple and coconut kind of character coming through from the hops. And again, we're playing around with our hop burping techniques with this beer. We're playing around with our cooler whirlpool temperatures, and we're just looking at some of the research that's been done with both Eldorado and Sabro and hot side and cold side, and seeing if we can kind of get a finished beer that sort of is saying, yeah, the research is right. And I think we're getting closer to that sort of stuff, which is really good.
So what does Sabro bring to the party?
Sabro is kind of again tropical fruit and a lot of coconut. It's, I think if you're familiar with Sriracha Ace has the coconut, but it also has quite an umami savory character.
But Sriracha was Japanese though, yeah?
Yeah, it was a joint I think hop growing program between an American, Yakima. I can't recall exactly who it was, but an American hop growing organization, and I think maybe Suntory or someone like that. It was, yeah, I can't, or actually no, it might have been Corinne. Anyway, it was one of them. But Srirachis are so unique. You're talking dill, you're talking mint, you're talking effectively overripe or moldy orange. You're getting mushrooms from it, and you're getting coconut as well. But I think in Belgian styles, that hop's phenomenal. Like if you get the chance to find a Brooklyn brewery, I think it's just called Sriracha Ace, the saison that they do. It's I remember trying that. We did a few collaborations with Garrett from Brooklyn back in the Thornbridge days, and he'd always bring bottles of that over. That was when Sriracha just come out, and it's just an amazingly cool hop. I think with the ester and phenol profiles that you can get from some of the Belgian yeast strains, particularly when the beer is quite dry, like you can with sort of more of a French saison style.
So if you're playing with that, would you add those still at boil and 15-minute sort of normal kettle, or would you actually do dry hop to bring?
We did both. We did all the way through. So we did quite a big dry hop. We did, I think it was about just under 5 grams per litre, so 2.5 grams per litre of each in the whirlpool. It was nothing in bittering. We did no bittering in it. And then it was 15 kilos. So yeah, about 12 grams per litre. So 6 grams per litre of each in the dry hop as well. So yeah, pretty heavy. I mean, there's probably a point of diminishing return when it comes to massive dry hopping. I know some of the American brewers push it to the extreme in terms of 15, 20 grams per litres, but I think anything, I mean, they'd always say eight was the magic number in terms of the solubility you're getting. And but I think, again, with the advent of different yeast strains and what's happening during fermentation with biotransformation of hop compounds and how it's changing the aromas, it's kind of bringing sort of a new wave of interest into not just looking at the proportions of hops you're adding to ferment or cold side or dry hopping, but also what yeast you're using and the techniques you're using and how long you're putting on the dry hops, whether you're doing hot or cold rests, what you're doing for your hop creep. So it's just again, if I had 30 hours in a day, I'd be spending 6 of them reading research on brewing, which would be cool. I wish.
Fun though. I mean, how are you finding sort of being a bit more off the tools?
I put on about 12 kilograms, about 10 kilograms, I think. So I'm definitely not at boxing weight anymore. I'm definitely more at rugby weight. So that's one thing I've noticed is my fitness isn't as full on as it was when I was running up and down stairs at Fork and Brewer and doing about 40 Ks a week in that tiny space. So but yeah, I'm happy I'm standing desk, so I don't sit down all day. This is the longest I've sat down in this interview for a wee while. But it's good. It means I can focus. I mean, effectively, as a brewery manager, I'm involved. It's just ordering and chasing suppliers and logistics, and that's becoming a bigger and bigger job in the world that we live in. With COVID and shipping issues and delays and so yeah, my role is that it's technical support for the crew. It's organising the schedules and what we're doing and liaising with Matt and looking at what we're doing next. And so we're doing a Pacific. We're collaborating with a brewery over in Cornwall in the UK called Verdant Brewing Company, who are really well known for particularly their NEPAs and that style. So we're working with Hop Revolution and going to do a 100% Pacific Sunrise hopped NEPA, which hopefully again will come out. We're getting some artwork done now, so hopefully that'll come out before Christmas as well in 440ml cans. So that'll be pretty fun. And Pacific Sunrise, I was on the sensory evaluation panel for Hop Revolution this year. So we looked at most of their hops are sold in the US and European markets, but we managed to secure some, and we're going to look at doing this kind of over the next probably 12 months, a bit of a collaborative, obviously recipes. We can't get to the UK and be there to collab with them. But the super cool thing as well with Verdant, where it is in Cornwall, it's the local tap room for Matt's mum and dad, who are from the UK and they live in Cornwall. So they can't come to their son's brewery in Upper Hutt anymore, but at least they can go and drink some Boneface collab New Zealand hot beers in their local pub, which would be good.
You're going to run the Verdant use for that? Because, I mean, Verdant's sort of very well known for that. I mean, like Lullen producing their dry version of it now and everything else like that. Is that going to be part of the profile? Or?
Yeah, we made the decision to go with our, because of, originally we were looking at all sorts of stuff with exporting the beers back and forward, but the cost of the containers gone up about 4-fold. So we can't really do it exactly as we wanted to. But we're going to look at using, obviously the difference being we'll look for similar grist, but use our local malts where we can. We'll be using the same hops. That'll be the sort of one thing that we're consistently going to do. We'll try and hit pretty much the same ABVs and gravities and water chemistry. give or take based on our local supplies, if we can manipulate that with our brewing salts, and then yeah, do that across the board. Hopefully, the plan will be to do a New Zealand Pilsner and a a bright IPA, a filtered New Zealand IPA in the series. That we'll do a series of 3 hopefully over the next 12 months.
So what will that be called in the UK then?
So it'll be the same. It'll be I think we're going to come up with our own artwork and our own brand for where we sell it. But it'll just be more the concept itself and the basic recipe outline will be done as a team, and then we'll do it in our own worlds. They're doing their one, I think maybe the first week of November, and we've got ours in the schedule for the beginning of the 3rd week. So so it's going to be fun. Just it's again using a hop that's not really utilized a lot. I know Sawmill did a beer recently with Pacific Sunrise, but when we're doing the hop, we do a all blind evaluation using a pretty cool sensory program and dealing with a company over in America that run it all for us called Draft Lab, and we hands down, I think the panel just was blown away by Pacific Sunrise, and it was developed at the same time as Nelson Sauvin in 2000, but it just never got any love. And Hop Revolution have really decided to play with it, and I think it's exciting. I mean, it's up there, I think, with things like Nectaron and the some of the cool research and new varieties that New Zealand hops are bringing out. So so it's going to be good. So we'll go pretty hard on that and see what it does to a.
We have to give them some good Maori names there. So.
What's that? Sorry,
we have to give them some good Maori names.
For the bears.
Yes.
Yeah. No. Actually, we're going to call this one. We're going straight up because of the Matt's bears are all themed around like music or heavy metal or whatever. So we're actually going for a relatively obscure Rage Against the Machine song because we're all Rage fans, and it's actually called Revolution. So that ties in well with doing a bit of a collab with Hop Revolution as well. And because most of the hops they just bail up and they go off to the US or to the UK and actually get palletized there. So they're not actually processed in New Zealand, but they do process a small amount, and we want some of those. So that's going to be good. So you're doing that. We're looking at a little project with freestyle hops as well, kind of based around seasonality. So that's another thing we're working on. So you're getting the chance to kind of sort of get my hands dirty in a different way. So it's just coming up with concepts and trying to get them into cans and bottles. So it's fun. Yeah, it's good. I do miss the days of just being able to put stuff in kegs. I don't think many brewers like packaging beer in bottles or cans, but it's kind of important in this day and age.
Yeah, well, the last 18 months, the whole kegging thing's really dropped off, I suppose. So.
Yeah, it's a big challenge for us. We're very lucky having the tap room and obviously being in a non-lockdown area, and the tap room being quite large. So that's what made it so cool last Thursday night.
The Brewers Guild event to be able to go out for a beer.
Yeah, it's quite good. Yeah, I prefer to sit at home and just drink it by doing Zoom talks. So it's way better.
That's all you have to choose from.
Yeah, true. I shouldn't say that too loud, eh? But I feel for you all up there. It's bloody tough, It's I feel
it's fun, like the first 7,000 times.
yeah. I've just been the joys of being an essential worker. I haven't had to sort of endure it. I can just get out, and last year I could go to the brewery, and I was spending most of my time distilling old beer into hand sanitizer back then. But we've managed to again work through. We've did a few days where we just had minimal staff on site, but we've got only 5 of us in the brewery. So it's we're just chipping away. Again, the keg sales aren't. I'd say we've dropped off so much. It's crazy actually, but the package sales are still ticking along, and have been helped a little bit by the awards. We've got a lot of orders for our Outlaw coming in thick and fast, which is really cool. So that's been.
Yeah, you want to? I'm actually having glass at the moment.
Yeah.
You want to?
Yeah.
You guys are real well with that.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, it's super. Again, for me, I'm probably getting this medal and trophy, and I remember with Bohemian Hipster, which is my New Zealand Pilsner at Falcon Brewer, winning a gold medal. I don't know, there's been lots of cool things that have happened in my brewing career, but they're definitely up there, to win Pilsner and Lager, and this is obviously an IPL. Trophies are awesome. But yeah, so Outlaw is again pretty straightforward, a little bit of Southern Cross for bittering. We use Hull Melon in the Whirlpool. And then good old classic combo, Mosaic and Citra. You can't beat it, you know. So it's a again 5.2%. It's not a massive dry hop. I think it's around about, what are we talking here to be? Not too, I don't know what it is, about sort of six grams per litre, something like that. Yeah, so 6.5 grams per litre, so 3-ish of each. Yeah, and just again, super simple. It's just one malt. It's just Pilsner malt. So Malt Europe Pilsner malt. So it's pretty straightforward there, and we're bloody stoked. You know, it's just again fine tuning bitterness, getting those residual sweetness, playing with mash temperature, looking at water chemistry, yeah, no, we're so happy. It's a beer that the whole brewery team. I think a lot of brewers love pilsners and lagers. You know, it's something after a hard day in the brewery, being surrounded by hop and yeast slurries and all sorts of aromas. The best thing ever is just smashing a nice crisp, clear beer. So that's Outlaws. So again, really amazingly happy of all the beers to win. That's the one that we're just stoked with. So.
Yeah, that's real good. So what we do? So is it Holland Mullen and the
so Hull, yeah. So Melon, like, this is a German hop variety. So Hull, so Hull Melon, we're chucking that in at bugger all about 2.5 grams per litre into Whirlpool. Enough Southern Cross and bittering to give about sort of 8 or 9 bitterness units, and the rest is coming from the Whirlpool edition. So aiming for around about sort of 30-ish. 30 to 35. Again, I'm not a big believer in IBUs. IBUs are a good measure if you want to do side by side brewing and figure out what sort of bitterness you want as a baseline. But there are so many other factors that come into play in terms of perceived bitterness in the mouth that aren't related to IBUs. But it's soft and it's smooth, and we finish at 10-10. You know, it's a 1050 to 1010 beer. So it's and try and get a pH of sub 5. Post Whirlpool, we find that we get more of a hop pop when we're so we do a little acidification at Whirlpool to get it down to about sort of 4.9 the pH, and then the yeast will bring it up, and if we can get that finishing pH below 4.5, we're just finding the drinkability just is way better. You can find, depending on your.
Why are you doing that later rather than, why are you doing that at mash time? Right, you're doing that at the end of the process, essentially.
Yeah. So this is really for organoleptic purposes, for sensory purposes. So during the mash, we don't really want to drop it too low because we're looking at enzyme optimums, and enzyme optimums are both pH and temperature related.
Right. So you're aiming for the 5.2 at that point.
That's right. Yes, we'll do a 5.2, and then we'll literally add. I think we can get usually at the end of boil, we'll be between sort of 5.1 and 5.2. And I think for every 100 or so mils of phosphoric acid, we can drop it by 0.1, give or take, based on our volume. So we'll add a couple of 100 mils of phosphoric acid, and that'll just drop it down below 5. And then it means that during the ferment, depending on what yeast strain we're using, we'll get slightly different finishing pHs. But you'll find that you might get a finishing pH with an ale strain of maybe 4.1, 4.2, maybe a lager strain it might be 4.3, 4.4. But for every it depends on the hop variety, but every X number of kilos of hops you're adding in the dry hop, you're going to get an increase in pH. And if you're doing quite a substantial
increase,
you'll get a a less acidic finished beer, and beer stability, clarity. There's all sorts of things that rely on pH. But one thing particular, actually for stronger beers, it's more important. So for beers like a big unit, you really, because you're doing such a big dry hop, you 100% don't want those to be too far above 4.5 in their final pH, because they kind of fatten up the hop character, and they make the beer just a little bit more chewy. And we've all had chewy hazies before. We've all had big chewy doubles, and we know that they're a bloody challenge to get through. So that's just something that, again, from I guess the sensory science perspective, the literature and brewing literature, and smarter people than me using tasting panels and all sorts have found that this is something that plays a role, and all I do is steal their amazing learnings and have a hoon in the brewery.
No, but you're actually applying it, you see, so that's makes you different from other humans.
It's a wicked thing to do, though, is if you ever get a chance, get a finished beer and just play around with its pH. It changes the way in which it tastes. Nice little self-deprecation there, Dad, man.
No, it's it's just
if there's less of bottles than you, we're yet to find one. We find them every day. Hey, but one thing I was going to ask you about, so then you're finding that acidification pre-fermentation is actually carrying through, and the yeast is not the yeast's own acidification is not actually cancelling that out, because I know quite a few people are playing with sort of post-fermentation acidification, because they find that it kind of pre's pretty, but you're actually finding dosing it pre is actually carrying through to an end point result post fermentation.
Big time, yeah. And if you want to as well, you can do post. It's all really down to what's presenting in the final beer. And we'll always monitor in our bright or our final beer as we package it. We'll do gravity and pH checks just to make sure that it's in spec, and then taste the beer and kind of to see if if the science matches what our palates pick up, and mostly it does, which is good. But yeah, it's just, again, it's that's 20 years of doing being in this world, and it's it's every day I'm just reading something more and learning something more and chatting to another brewer about something, and they're trying this, and they're doing that, and it's just I don't think. I've never ever got sick of it, and I don't think I ever will. And you all know as home brewers, that's the crazy sort of obsessive world of trying to make great beer. It's I'll never. I'll do it till I can't do it anymore. That's for sure. I don't know if it's probably a good idea, because I do want to buy a house one day, but it's all right. You can live in a fermenter. It's all good. A big one. Any other questions? Anything else? Any questions at all? Any open floor questions? I can make out some answers pretty easily.
I got one, and that is just with regard to surprise. With the number of the beast, what's your water minerality on that? Because for me, the water profile on this is wicked. That's the other thing. Is it's got. I've tasting a fair amount of chloride, but it doesn't have that fishy kind of calcification on the thing. I think the balance on it's wicked.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Dave. No, it's we use quite a bit of sodium bicarbonate. We use magnesium sulfate. Obviously, you don't want to go too high with magnesium sulfate, otherwise it's laxative. So always be aware when you're playing around with Epsom salts in brewing.
It would stop the leg twitches, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It's it's fine if you're doing a Zoom meeting on the toilet as well. You can go hard with your magnesium sulfate. You might lose weight while you're drinking. But the
that's a good selling point these days.
yeah, exactly. Who needs those artificial sweeteners to have the laxative effect when you can go hard on Epsom salts? But the so Epsom salts we generally put into most of our beers anyway, and you're right, we go quite high on chlorides and low on sulfates, which is pretty common in sort of in darker beers. Off the top of
sodium in there?
Actually, I can probably look, because I've got one moment, please.
It's got a beautiful softness to it on the palate, which I think a bit of it comes from water. It's just
we've got a little bit of calcium sulfate. Actually, we didn't do there was no sodium chloride in it, but we were very, very heavy on the sodium bicarbonate.
What's your base water you've got there in Wellington?
It's very very. How do I make this big again? Here we go. Very, very soft. Yeah. So we've got a reservoir up in Upper Hutt, the Temaroa Reservoir, and it's it's interesting. Obviously Panhead won the Pilsner Trophy for New Zealand styles, and we won the Lager Trophy. So maybe it's something to do with the softness of the water and the upper reaches of Upper Hutt. So who knows? Oh, and Kereru won the barrel age trophy, but it's probably not so much to do with the water, with the delicious barrel aging that we do. But super soft.
But generally through the country, it's like that, though, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and it's just a good palate. I think that's one thing we're really lucky here as brewers. There's not many places that have issues with massive kettle scale. When you're boiling your jug and stuff. and so we don't have any hardness issues, and yeah, everything's just like really low. So it's I think it's similar. I'm lucky. I've sort of always kept a spreadsheet of all the water profiles of pretty much every place that I've brewed, and every place that I've brewed has had really, really soft water. You know, low sulfate, low chloride, low iron, low everything. So it's yeah, makes for good brewing, and makes for gives you the ability to have lots of experimentation with water chemistry as well, which is something that I've got a mad passion for. I think it's very much something that it's not underutilized, but it's not really discussed as much as we do hops.
Your advice to home brewers then, as far as water treatment?
I mean, the first thing to do really is if you're brewing the same beer constantly, and you've got like a recipe that you love and always gets good results, even just starting to play around with things like the sulfate to chloride ratio, whether it be calcium sulfate and calcium chloride additions. But I'm a big believer. I mean, like Dave was saying, with salt with sodium ions, I think they've got a really amazing place in sort of beer sensory science, particularly the way that they give an impression of sweetness. I mean, there's always the classic example of taking a bit of raw pineapple that's maybe underripe, a little bit underripe, so it's not quite ripened, and dipping it in salt and tasting it, and seeing what that does to your palate and what it does to the pineapple. And it's a real simple experiment that you can do. Even anything that's underripe, just dip it in a bit of salt and chuck it in your mouth, and it just boom, you get this big sort of like burst.
You can even post those beers with sodium. I mean, like take a beer and just a little bit of salt post, like pour it.
Yeah.
It's quite wicked what it does.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, and I remember doing trials with poor old Jack, who was our bar manager at Falk and Brew. He'd help me out in the brewery a day a week. He said he had a bit of time brewing over in Paris and stuff, and he was my guinea pig when I was doing the initial trials for my miso stout at Falk and Brewer with MSG. So what I did is, as any good food scientist would do, I started with the highest concentration first and made him taste that. And and I think he said that at the end of the day, the flavor was still with him. So I knew that was a little bit high. So I didn't go with that one. But again, that's the intensity, obviously, with MSG being umami and what the glutamate, it's a salt from an amino acid, does is quite different in terms of how it works on your taste buds and what channels it opens. Yeah, and then sodium, so they reckon sodium, the presence of sodium ions, if you get it right, and so you're on that threshold of it not being salty, can increase perceived sweetness up to about 20%. So it's effectively saying, lactose is something like 20% the sweetness of sucrose, for example. So you're almost getting what lactose would give a beer in terms of latent sweetness just from adding a salt and getting the right sort of parts per million level of good old table salt. So
and you mentioned Epsom salts before, so the magnesium gives a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, magnesium is generally it can help with chelation of phosphates that are coming from the husks themselves, from the grist. It can obviously help to chelate carbonate as well if you've got any issues with water hardness. And I think it's sort of pretty good for yeast vitality as well. A little bit of magnesium. Often.
So how much is the magnesium for process as opposed to actually sensory taste?
It's more process. Yeah, you don't really want to get it too high. Anything over, I think, 100 parts per million is where it's getting a laxative. So you don't really want that. But we're only adding.
You want to be sponsored by Treasures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I don't think they do adult diapers.
It's a good beer name.
Let them tie a few of them together.
That depends.
Don't ask how I know, but anyway.
So it's a you can't. I don't know. Magnesium sulfate solely, like we use yeast nutrient, or autolyze, or dead yeast effectively to help with yeast growth, to add amino acids and stuff. So it's it's generally process only magnesium sulfate, unless you really got some beer drinkers you don't like. Maybe you're sponsoring, I don't know, Destiny Church or something. They want some beers. You can always chuck a bit of magnesium sulfate in there.
a bit of a segue with the salting side. So I started the night with the Goza.
Oh, nice.
And,
yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be salt in it.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, cracking! Like that was a really nice way to start the night, actually.
Yeah, it's super. It's a great beer. It's a real rounded beer. It's just I call that a drinker. It's got a little bit of hop, a little bit of acidity, a little bit of salt, and it's super quenching.
Perfect summer beer.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a beautiful. That was a beautiful way. I mean, what sort of hop are you putting in that? Because it's very citrusy. Like it is.
Yeah,
Like
that's
the
Sauvin and Citra.
balance-
Yeah.
What's that?
Sorry, Nelson, Sauvin, and Citra. Yeah, so good, great combo. Yeah, so it's that's just, we try to make it pretty simple. It's literally Pilsner and wheat malt. We actually add the salt in post ferment as well. So we're adding the salt in when we dry hop, and it's what are we doing? We're doing about it's about a kilo and about 2,700 liters. So it's 1,000 grams and 2,600 odd liters. So probably for a standard homebrew, you're looking at 1.5 teaspoons, maybe 2 teaspoons, something like that. If you're doing a 20
Culture
liter batch.
salt, obviously.
Beg your pardon, sorry.
As Americans call it, kosher salt.
Kosher.
Kosher, well, there goes the style we call this one for that. We don't. It's not a traditional gozer in that it doesn't have the coriander seeds, which historically in Leipzig, it's the only beer under the Reinheitsgebot that's allowed to have a non-Reinheitsgebot ingredient. So we call it a beer is actually as gozer. So we don't do coriander. We just take it. I mean, it's a classic good old Matt Dainty beer. It's and I used to do a really nice one at Fork as well called Galactic Gozer, which was dry hop with 4.5% as well. Actually, dry hop with Galaxy and Nariwaka, which is a lovely combo. Also, if you can ever get Nariwaka on a commercial level, which is quite hard these days.
That's nice.
Yeah, but no, the juices. Yeah, again, for me, a drinking beer, it will be our Stay Clean. Outlaw and the Juice will be my favorite. We also do a keg only American Pilsner called Lithium, which is the holy hop trinity of El Dorado, Idaho 7, and Equinox. It's super awesome, and it's quite a bit of maize as well, malted maize that we use in it, which is yummy. So yeah, I love those beers. They're good. They're great.
We're going to see a sort of banging German Pilsner soon, because you did some very nice ones.
I'd like to, yeah. I think it's I'll be pushing the boss a bit too hard if we end up trying to get sort of another. We've got three lager / pilsners on the go at the moment. But again, we talked about that. I did the one day. Now that's right. Doing the small batch stuff for the tap room, doing the Calabears, and that's my right up my alley. I really love, particularly like I was saying earlier, my European and German hop varieties. Obviously a beer I did at Fork and Brewer Slip Pills, which morphed into Golden Handshake when we did it in bottles, did super well for us in terms of awards and things. And that was again, Perla and Sapphire as the hop varieties, which are just both incredible hops. And yeah, I'm just hoping for that time where the New Zealand drinking public is a little bit less haze. What's the new hazy focus and more? Can we get some great hoppy pilsners? Because that's just such a cool style of beer to drink. Hoppy pilsners are maybe some good English milds and ESBs on cask as well, please.
Yes.
Go on, bring it on.
Yeah,
Just go back to the Gozer. What sort of grams a lady are you putting on that?
It will happen.
It's got a very, very citrus forward, but it's so balanced. Like
yeah,
it's
actually
sort of like at 4.5%. I'm guessing you're like at that sort of 5-6 grams, but
I'm doing some maths now. It's 2,700. We're doing. It's only 4. You're 4 grams per liter. Yeah,
4 grams. Yeah. But it's so balanced because it's so light.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. No, it's yeah, I don't know. Sometimes less is more as well. I think there's a tendency now with brewers, and there has been probably for the last 5-10 years, or no, probably not 10 years, maybe 6-7 years, to just go hard with the dry hops and try and wow the customer with sort of aromatic impact alone. But I think particularly when you're talking sort of sub 5% and sub 5% beers, there's a lot to be said for subtlety and allowing the beer to be more of a whole package than just a kind of an instrument for sort of releasing hops into the stratosphere. And so the juice is exactly that, and it's again, like I was saying, it's kind of this weird, sits in this weird mid-ground with the pH. A finishing pH of usually aim between sort of 3.4 and 3.5 for the juice, and we actually just sort of fine-tune that with lactic acid, and we're doing that post ferment as well, which is interesting. We're still going for that just under 5 pH as it runs into fermenter, so it will do that in the kettle at Whirlpool, chuck it in the FV, and then we'll just drop it down with lactic acid additions. And we actually played around with, since I've been there, with kettle additions of lactic acid to drop it quite low versus fermenter post ferment. And we're finding we're getting way better results adding it in post ferment.
So you're not kettle souring it, that's all post dosed.
Originally it was, yeah. We before my time, Matt would do a few kettle sours, but the nature of his kit means that by kettle souring, and then because it's a direct fired gas burner, when you crank it up again, the protein generally sinks to the bottom. And he was finding he was getting kettle charring and having to dump the wort. So it was more of a strategic decision that was process-based to use lactic acid. And it's good though. I mean, there's been a lot of research that you can find online with people doing sensory from lactic acid bacteria versus lactic acid addition. And it's more probably being a purist than anything. I mean, if you can call kettle souring being a purist, you're getting the same the same sensory results. And we can hardly tell the difference. The only difference we're finding is how the yeast, we use 008 for that. The yeast ferments slightly differently depending on the initial pH, whether it be through stress or whatever. And we're getting more sort of almost like stone fruity yeast derived characters from doing the ferment at a standard wort pH as opposed to a pH that's dropped. But in saying that, I'm about to do a trial for fermenters. I've been working with fermenters since my time at Falk and Brewer, and looking at a new souring strain that they've put out that's lactic acid and acetic acid producing. So we'll do what's that?
No, not Philly.
No, it's it's like it's a weird species. It's I'm trying to think what it is. It's a brevis, but it's a strange genus. But yeah, it's something they did an original one, but this is just solely for kettle souring alone. So we're going to get the work going and then clean our mash tun, transfer the work back into the mash tun at 35 degrees, and then pitch the bacteria and leave it we'll monitor it at 24, roughly 36, and then should be done by that to drop the pH down to about 3.6.
In what sort of time?
Should be about 24 to 36 hours generally with these. Depends on the strain you're using. I use a lot of yogurt bacteria at Fork doing my yogurt and brewies and
no, but you mentioned the new strain.
Yes, yeah.
So how long will that convert in?
Yeah, at the same time, generally across the board, depending on the strain and the temperature. So the fermenters SAF sour range that they've just been started bringing out over the last probably 12 sort of 18 months all do pretty well at around sort of 35 to maybe 38 degrees Celsius. But then some of the strains that I used to use that were yogurt, Streptococcus thermophilus, and I'm trying to remember what the lactose strain was. It was a dual strain. It was just for yogurt production because when I started doing these at Falk and Brewer, there wasn't anything on the market. So I just kind of went full food science nerd and started looking around in a website actually called Curds and Whey for like home yogurt and cheese makers, and found that they did a type of freeze-dried lactic acid bacteria for like $100. That was you could do the equivalent of 5,000 liters of yogurt with this tiny little sachet. I was like, I'll give that a hoon. And I had the head brewer Ben from Gigantic Brewing in Portland and his now wife, which I've forgotten her name, which is horrible. Starts with A. Anyway, she was from Wild Rose Brewery in Calgary in Canada. They were over for Beavana back in the day when Portland brewers would come over, and we've been back and forth. I've been paired up with him to do a collaboration when he was over here, and he'd just released a beer in the US, a boysenberry sour, kettle sour called Boys in the Hood. And obviously with my love of puns, I thought that was quite good. And they would use, because America's all about fat-free, because they're such lean individuals over there, they would easily get fat-free yogurt or yogurt, whatever they call it. And we couldn't get fat-free anything in terms of yogurt over here. So that's where I went into the freeze-dried bacteria and it worked really well. But it was a higher temperature. Generally, yogurt production, they're looking at almost close to 50 degrees Celsius. So I'd run it around about 40, I think 45 to 46 degrees. And but you get quite you get anything from 24 to about 37, 38 hour. I think the longest I took to get a drop to 3.5 from around 5 initial pH. Excuse me, sorry, I'd always drop it to 4.8 first. So if you're doing kettle sours and you're using bacteria to sour, if you drop your pH down to below 4.8, it actually at that pH, it inhibits gene expression for a protease that the lactic acid bacteria produce. It's just as part of their natural metabolism, and then what that does is means that you'll get less proteolytic activity, so breaking down of proteins during the kettle souring, which will allow you to have better head retention and potential foam capability later on in the process post yeast fermentation. So that's another thing where something like pH can even affect it at a genetic level. So it's affecting the triggers that allow their genes to be expressed to produce these certain enzymes as part of their metabolism to be consuming what it is that they want to consume. So you can monitor that solely by pH as well. So it's there's lots always to learn, and it's a lot of cross training as well. I'll be reading articles, cheese making and wine making and all the different fruit chemistry that's done, because you might find certain compounds in the brewing process or from bacteria or from yeast, but they haven't been studied in a beer world. So it's I get to use the good old food science degree, which is good. So it's cool.
That SAF one you were talking about, is that LB1?
Yeah, I've got it. I did do a big document, if you don't mind me.
Because, in terms of the aesthetic profile on it, how forward is it? Is it sort of pretty laid back restrained, like almost like a fill profile, or is it quite sort of?
Well, they've only just released it. So so the technical sort of sales guru from Fermentis is effectively getting breweries to help them out, but I think he has sent me some stuff. I'd have to find it. It's in an email somewhere. Cool. Yeah, but I love
acetic acid in beer. I think it's just because it's beautiful, like at different levels. It kind of changes the texture, the mouthfeel, the whole.
It does, yeah. It's and I mean, the only flip side is that originally we were looking at utilizing this sour because it's he wants us to do it with BE134 because he's getting some really interesting ester development using that strain as well. So we've got everything ready to go, and we were going to eventually put that beer into barrel. But the only thing with Brettanomyces in particular, if you're getting even a little bit of micro oxygenation through depending on how old or young the barrel is and how porous the oak is, you can get quite a lot of acetic acid production from Brett. And that's interestingly, that's like someone like Vinny Salat. So at Russian River, one of the main reasons, obviously, when you've got a barrel that's got a whole lot of bugs in it and it's got a beautiful pellicle on top, you don't want to be lifting the bung out in and out because every time you're going to be allowing oxygen in. So he found that by doing that, that presence of oxygen was really increasing the acetic acid production of the Bretts and also of if there's any acetobacter in that kind of oxidative area. So that's why he always does the classic old drill a hole in about three quarters of the way up the cap of the barrel and stainless steel nail, and does all the sampling from then. So you're getting obviously keep the bung in, so you've got sort of pressure on it, so you control flow rate by releasing the bung a little bit as well if you need to. But yeah, just all those things I've got to start thinking about. I guess it's that different world. It's looking at potentially getting basic equipment to look at perceived acidities versus or total acidity of the finished product as opposed to pH, because obviously as brewers it's quite easy for us to read pH just by using a meter, but it's not.
Titrating for that, or?
Yeah, we'll just do I just do sodium hydroxide titrations with an indicator and try and see if we can start to figure out our total acidities of, particularly when we're doing sour beers and looking at the barrel aging program, and then seeing if we can tie in that data with how the beer is presenting and tasting as well. And then you've got to bring in the next thing, which is the acids that will be coming if we start adding fruit to the barrels. What acid profile is coming from that? So whether it's malics or tartarics or citrics or oxalics or good old lactics. So they're all going to allow the beer to present differently and hopefully drink differently. And it will be yet another voyage of discovery doing that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of 3.4, 3.5. Oh, so yeah, 4.4. Whatever, 3.4, 3.5 on that Gosa.
Yes.
Well, that sourness to me is like just perfect for my palate.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and it is. That's exactly what we try and do. Again, you've got it still finishes that beer pretty low, around sort of 1009 gravity. So it, in theory, doesn't have a lot of residual sweetness, but in terms of bittering, in the kettle, we're talking, after liquoring back, we're probably talking 2,800 liters. We're using 175 grams of hops. So it's probably like a sort of a homebrew amount of hops. So overall bitterness, and you're getting, with that yeast staying in suspension. The only thing is, and this is something interesting, at a low pH, yeast flocculates a lot better. So we do find the only negative with the juice is that pH, because it's 008 yeast and would stay in suspension above a pH of 4, once we hit a pH of about 3.8, which we found, we do a using ruby grapefruit juice, we do a keg only hazy pale ale called Smash It Up. And we've noticed that as well, that you're going from that kind of hazy murk, that double sort of intense bitterness or yeasty kind of like yeast bite, and try something new. So it's it's me. It's good. I love it. It's my favorite part of the job. That, and obviously managing people, which is great. We all love being managers. It's awesome.
And if you're good at it, if you're not good at it,
I've got a great. The team is so good. Yeah, the team's we've got a small team, and they're just great humans. So it's good. There's lots of laughs, and everyone's generally pretty happy to do their job, even though that we all drive home afterwards. No one lives up in Upper Hutt. Most of us live out in Wellington, so there's not too much drinking after work, but it still doesn't change it too much. Have a beer on Friday. It's always good. So that's cool.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, I also had just the regular. I couldn't find the big unit, and but I figured the 6-pack has got the unit, and it's got IPL, which obviously done very, very well recently. In terms of local comps, there goes was a nice little starter. So I've definitely been enjoying these beers.
Oh, cool. That's good.
And I think it's sort of years of experience, where some people are still trying to. I mean, you're still playing with things, you're still trying to learn and figure things out, but you're really taking that scientific level to it, which is pretty cool. Looking outside the box, like some of those yogurt and those yogurt sort of fermentations, and like how can you make that apply to beer? That's real cool.
Yeah. I think that's the challenge of it. It's most brewers love being in a kitchen as well and making good kai. So it's it's just an extension of that. If you muck around with trying to make stuff taste yum in a kitchen, you can bring all of that same philosophy and a lot of those same practices into a brew house and often get the same results.
It's called a passion, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's I think the diversity of the beer world is, even though in some ways the styles that are produced have got smaller, also the plethora of sort of global styles has got bigger in terms of what people are doing. I mean, I'm still lamenting that it's very difficult for brewers in New Zealand to sell lots of maybe Belgian or German styles, because that's not what the market wants. And I do have a small concern that might kind of limit the types of beers that as drinkers and beer lovers we're able to purchase. But then you've got your McLeods, and you've got your North Ends and stuff, still just being true to style and doing these smaller batches of really cool, Ralph beers and Belgians and saisons and all the stuff that's always going to keep, I think, a lot of kind of learned beer drinkers really fascinated. And it's.
But don't you see, that sort of general populist taste palette as the new frontier? How far can we push it?
Yeah, and that's the cool thing as well. That's where particularly it's a bit of a challenge to really look at beers that have less bitterness in them, and that's something we find in terms of feedback is probably the more modern and younger consumer hasn't grown up with a lot of bitterness in their life.
Yeah,
so
RTDs.
Yeah, well, that's it exactly. And it's a lot of sweeter stuff that they drink. So I think things like hazies are filling that gap for that reason, for people who are still interested in the beer world, but also all your fruited sours and all those things. But again, as long as I don't want to go into a supermarket in 10 years' time and just find a few pilsners and hazies on the shelves. And
no.
and if you do go to the supermarket now, it's pretty much like that. It's
it's just hazies.
it's just
Promiscuity is a good
yeah.
thing.
Oh God,
It's
even
what the
I'm
consumer wants.
I know. What most consumers don't know anything. It should be what the brewer wants. God, they don't know that.
We do
and that
miss
was
the fork a little bit, but I mean, like you still
Yeah,
do a
that
beer
was-
festival any day of the week there.
yeah. And that was the cool thing about being in a brew pub and not really having to rely so much on intensive volume sales through packaged product. You know, to be able to go right, I want to do this and give it a hoon, and it's only 20 kegs. Let's go for it, you know. And it was just great, and people would come in and I guess it get to the point where they'd expect that. And you know, we've just sort of doubled the amount of taps we've got pretty much at Boneface. We had a tank that Matt built for Beervana, like an actual proper sort of like military tank that you could serve beers on. Which,
like a pan.
He was talking about it the night before, and when he was talking about
Yeah.
tank, I thought he was talking about some kind of stainless. I didn't realize he meant a tank.
yeah, like an actual proper tank here with a turret and everything, and yeah, bullet shaped like taps on the side to drink out of, and to pour from. So we've actually set that up in the tap room as well. So we've got it's another 8 taps for us. We just put a hand pull on. We had Karen from North End's ESB on tap for the Brewers Guild Awards, which I think there might be this bugger all left in that. We actually just threw keg with a little bit of low level top pressure, almost like a cast breather system, and kept it in a big barrel of water at about 11 degrees Celsius, which was pretty good. And obviously having done most of my brewing in the north of England, that had a sparkler on, not a sparkler off. So block your ears if you're from the south. And yeah, so I mean, it'd be cool to eventually get to the point at Boneface where I've got about half a dozen firkins. I'm in the process of getting some shives and keystones from Jim at Twisted Hop if you can find them, and then we'll have a hoon on some cask ale as well, and look at some cask ale ferments and setting up a little system where we can run the casks with maybe a small sort of low level CO2 cask breather, just pumping maybe at 2 psi, so CO2 in every time we pull a pint out. And yeah, if we get the casks going and get them upright with this cask,
put a bit of life on the casks.
Yeah, we'll be able to actually just do proper. They probably won't be vegan. I'd like to use proper isinglass if I can and find them properly and do it the actual way and let them condition. But we'll see. Watch the space. You know, it's one good thing about Matt being English. You know, I'm like, bro, we should do some cask ale. He's like, yeah, we should. Let's do it. So that's pretty exciting as well. That's obviously got Ian here as Ian knows, it's such an incredible style, one to produce and make and have those smells that an open fermenter has. You know, I miss that still from having almost 5 years of my brewing career with open fermenters. That's definitely something that I wish we'd have a bit more of in New Zealand. You know, it's just an amazing way to produce beer, an amazing way to drink beers through a hand pull and into a imperial pint.
Hey, Kelly, if anyone can bring this to New Zealand, you can. I hope you do.
I'm going to try. I'm going to try.
Good.
We'll get there eventually. Yeah, we've got a couple.
Yeah.
We did a couple at Fork. I had to do sort of more like keg condition, or take them from maturation into keg, and then we'd chuck them under the bar with into effectively ice buckets to get them to the right temperature. And that was as close as we could get. But I mean, I could do milds, I could do Burton ales, I could do all sorts there. So and that's again such a cool thing. I think of the team, we've got a Scotsman, an Englishman with Scottish ancestry, an Englishman, 2 Englishmen, and a former, I guess, fella that brewed over there. But we do have one. Me and him, we've got 2 Kiwis, but everyone there is keen as to smash some British style beers. And again, they're not big sellers. It's more just I think.
But you know, it will be though. It could be again. It's a fashion thing, isn't it? With beer.
It is.
So
yeah,
it could come around that way. Just
Is the Burton ale, Fork and Brewer these days? Is that your recipe?
I think it's I don't think Braden's changed it too much, but I don't know if he might have tweaked the hops a little bit.
I had it over Beervana and it was fucking lovely.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I actually I did the same. I was in there around that time.
Yeah.
I know some of the beers took a while to go through my last batches, and I was just like, "Is this the last of my batch?" Like, nah, it's Braden. So I couldn't tell the difference, which means whatever he's done, he's doing a bloody good job. So
nice.
Yeah, no, he's doing well. He's good. I'm glad. You know, probably a lot of there were a few brewers in New Zealand that could have done it. You know, probably maybe handful of doing the craziness that is that site and trying to do that many beers, and Braden's jumped, just gone hard, and he's done a bloody good job. So, and he's doing, he loves it. I message him about 20, or he messages me, I should say, about 20 times a day. Photos of the brewery, what's happening. Yeah, great. Something broke again. So now I still keep in touch with him a lot and have a great relationship with him, which is cool. So it's good. It's a good industry for that. We all share the knowledge and keep in touch with one another, whether it's from the bottom of the south to the top of the north. There's a really cool network of knowledge sharing, and there's not too many secrets, which is good. And that helps the old classic old rising tide and all that. It's helps us all make better beer.
Yeah.
I'm just on that. I mean, you've had a very, very varied past, like the amount of different styles that you've done, the amount of different breweries you've done, big, small, whatever. It's going to be a big question, but, which single brewery has had the biggest effect on you?
Probably in terms of learnings, it'll be Fork, really, I guess. Just mainly for the place and the owners allow me just to have complete sort of, carte blanche, free reign, just go for it. And it meant I could push myself and kind of learn on the go, and it's not often you get to do, be able to put sort of 40 odd beers on tap and look at all those different beer styles and actually go, I could do a wit beer, I can do a Dunkelweizen, I can do a Burden Ale, I can do a nitro stout, whatever. It's so that was that was definitely, Colin was great for that. He'd always push me along, and it was awesome. That made a huge impact. But saying that, probably really actually heading to the UK and starting up in Scotland at Fine Ales, and going from what I knew as brewing, which is this massive industrial process, because when I was studying and thought, I'll give this brewing thing a home when this job came up, it wasn't really it wasn't about craft. There wasn't a craft brewing sort of realm, I guess, 20 years ago. It was a job. You'd chuck your white gumboots and your overalls on, your boiler suit on, and you'd go and get dirty and try to get dodged by the spanners that the fitters and turners would be throwing at you, and have a few laughs in the process. And it was so different. It's such a different realm, but at the same time, it's exactly the same in terms of the processes and what it is you're trying to achieve. But it's been I've loved my 2 decades of a journey through beer, and seeing kind of where it's taken me and where it will take me, and I enjoy working for other people. I'm not a business person. I'm a scientist and a brewer, so to allow other people to have make all those hardcore decisions and me to focus on getting our crew to make great beer and do it consistently, and kind of use the tools we've got to make it's great. And Matt's an awesome boss for that reason as well, because he's exactly on the same wavelength. I've known him for years, and we have a corridor and stuff happens, so it's good. It's really good.
Just need to work on your Auckland distribution. Trying to find your beers up here is a challenge, mate.
Yeah, it is. Well, luckily, which is awesome, but we've been a bit hampered by lockdowns and stuff, as our distributor Hop and Vine has just hired an Auckland sales rep, Josh. So I know for a fact when I sent Steve the list of places that might have some Boneface beers, that he was going to rock in and try and hustle hard to get some beers into those sites. So
I think many of them were cleaned out in the last 2 days.
Yeah, man. Yeah, thanks. We'll be I wonder if the Brewers get a bonus for I wonder who organises Steve. What does he get a bonus?
I was talking to the few of them, and they're saying, "Is there something on? Everyone wants Boneface." And it's just it did blip.
Oh, it's good. We'll be probably got the best sales in Auckland for ages. So
exactly. Tell them to follow up on Monday.
Well, it's also one of those things that even that I actually struggled to find those 2 beers that you mentioned. But I made a few phone calls, and I bet there was a few people thinking, like, shit, I'm going to get these beers in.
They might have thought, what did you know about the awards? You might have known who was going to win the trophy or something. Maybe, the inside word. No, it's good. We'll work on that. Distribution's hard in New Zealand. It's the challenges we have as brewers at the moment is if it ain't a new release, people don't want it. And that's kind of a hard place to be. A lot of brewers are perfectionists, and they want to make their, their babies bang on and awesome, and that doesn't happen with one-off beers as easy as it does with beers that you're consistently making and trying to improve and tweak and make excellent. So I kind of hope that trend disappears a little bit, but I think it's here to stay. All we're getting was, can you do new 440s? Can you do this? Can it be under this ABV? But it kind of restricts what brewers want to do in a way. But again, it's we're in an FMCG society. As a brewer, it's all about, we've got to make something that people want, and so it's always that compromise between making what you want as a brewer and making what people want and will buy, and then hopefully allow you to keep making what you want. So it's always a challenge.
Hey, Kelly, we've taken probably far too much of your time here. So
it's my bedtime, and the alarm goes off at 5 to get to work. And that's all right.
no, so
I'll probably have to finish these beers though. Yeah, I'll probably get in trouble though if I do. It'll be fine. Yeah.
So thank you very much
your fault.
for
blame us.
giving us your time. Kapai.
But yeah, hey, thanks for listening to my
Cheers.
yarns. Yeah, I tend to talk too much, so it's
been very entertaining. It's great.
I appreciate it.
It was a great session.
Pure genius. I don't think I've ever met anyone who knows his shit quite like you do. So.
I'm good.
It's probably why I went so long, because as you say, like the scientific level you have of beer, and your knowledge probably exceeds that of most in New Zealand. So we're very, very grateful.
Yeah, just don't try and
pretty good statement.
Just don't fact search any of the stuff I've said, because I probably just made it up.
Yeah, right.
I love that. I think again, and you all know that as being brewers as well. It's a pretty fun voyage. It's, for me, been able to apply science and actually get the science into your gullet is it's what makes it all worthwhile. So,
and enjoy
of all the things, I'm pretty happy. I was thinking of going to go and work for Fonterra, so I probably wouldn't have had the same passion for, I don't know, skim milk, freeze-dried skim milk powder. So I'd rather it be with beer.
We made lots of Primo.
Yeah.